Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty. We're actually here with the old man's council. I think save maybe Gene, and Dagan is especially, Dagan turned 50 the week we're recording this. And so I'm going to keep reminding him of that. Welcome to the show, my friend.
You really do keep reminding me of that.
Yeah. Good to see you.
50's great. I love being 50.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really did. I thought it would be like traumatic. Just like you probably thought 40 would be traumatic, but you get to a point and you're just kind of like, oh, fuck it. You just give into it and you're like, oh, I'm not even joking with you. I mean, that life trope or that fear of 40 or 50 or getting older, once you hit it and you're like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it. You're like, oh, that whole thing gets to fade away and you're just like living. And it's like, this is much better.
Yeah, it's the anxiety leading up that's almost worse.
I agree, 100%.
Right? The big moment comes, and then it's... I'll tell you what, though, the add insult to injury, I was just saying on Twitter, on X.
No, don't ever do that. Don't ever feel ashamed about calling it what it really is.
Let's call it Twitter? Okay, that's fair enough. I like that. I was just saying, as soon as 50 rolled around, I got a horrible cold. So apologies if I'm all stuffed up. I was just telling Colin, like... double checking where's the mute button in case I have to sneeze, that whole thing. I don't think I've ever been this sick.
Oh shit.
In all the years I've podcasted.
Oh, wow. Is it COVID or just a cold?
I think it's just a cold.
AIDS?
I could tell I'm very sinusy.
It's what? It's what?
Yeah, I asked me at AIDS.
That wasn't an option.
It's just so I'm thinking about, there was a time when that joke would have been just so awful, and it's just so wonderful that now people can get drugs for it and live their whole lives and stuff.
Totally.
But I'm just, but it's also funny to think that your brother would have AIDS.
Yeah, it would be weird. No. I got to do a blood transfusion.
I know.
I don't know, or some other unsavory activities.
Needles,
Well, Dave, good to see you, my friend.
To see you guys.
Good to be here with you. The Lord Cognito, I was thinking about you. We're recording this the day after, so this is going to go live well after this because we're backfilling, but the day after the Game Awards. And I was thinking about you last night because of the Sega. Yeah, there you go. You got your Shinobi shirt on.
Look at that.
I was watching that trailer, and Mike is a much newer gamer. And I think I might have impressed her a few times last night because I was just calling things left and right. I'm like, dude, when World of Goo 2 was announced, and it was like showed for 2 seconds. I'm like, that's World of Goo.
Yep.
And so with that, I was like, oh, Cog is going to love this. Dude, when I saw Jet Set Radio is good, but when I saw Crazy Taxi, which I love, one of my very favorite Dreamcast games and great in the arcade.
They better bring Offspring back for opening track.
Exactly what we said.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, all I want. And what I used to say when I used to play it on Dreamcast, I thought he was saying start a war. Like, start a war. But it's not at all what he's saying. And that was weird, especially because I had that record. I think that's on the second Offspring actual record, Ixnay on the Ombre. But Cog, it's good to see you. So you were on my mind recently. You're ready to celebrate. It's your time to shine now. Welcome to the show. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see everybody. Got Jaffe in the building too. I'm ready. Let's get this. Yeah, I'm excited. And shout out. Everybody hit me up. As soon as I saw that trailer, it was like, I was in 87 immediately. It transported me. I immediately knew it was going to happen because I own the arcade Shinobi board. I know the stand. I know the marquee. I have it. So I'm like, yo, they're about to do it. And I went crazy. So yeah, I'm in a good place right now.
And Golden Axe looks potentially interesting. And then I didn't know Streets of Rage. I still don't know what it is, but it kind of, at first I'm like, that looks like Power Stone. Right? Because it doesn't look like a Streets of Rage. Like what's the game that they put out last year that was like a really good 2D street? Was it Final Fight or Streets of Rage 4?
Oh, like a traditional beat 'em up. Yeah.
It doesn't look like that. It looks it's an isometric 3D game, and I'm like, is this a multiplayer Power Stone Streets of Rage, or is it just like room by room? But yeah, that was the first. They showed a lot last night. I know it's not last night, but they showed a lot a long time ago at the Game Awards that But that was that I loved. But that was the first thing I saw that I was like, oh, that's a great way to kick it off. It was really exciting.
Yeah. I'm really interested too if they like who's making them. I wonder if any external teams are making them, because I know Konami has solicited external people to pitch them on all their stuff, and that's where Blooper Team came in with. And dude, if I had more money and means or whatever, like in time, I would pitch them on Castlevania in 2 seconds. But and then I know Atari's taking pitches. Like we've pitched Atari, so at Lilymo to revive one of their old games. So I wonder if they've gone out either quietly or more overtly and said like pitch us on the revivals of these, or if it's going to be all internal Sega Studios doing it, because they still have outside of Atlas and P Studio and whatever and a few other things they had, and Ryu got Gotoku and stuff, they don't really have delineations. It's very much like Nintendo, where it's just like EAD, and no one really knows what that is. And so I don't know if they have the resources to do all that, kind of like Japan Studio like. But nonetheless, you were on my mind.
Are those broken up into, it's not a collection of titles, correct?
It's going to be all individual. Yeah.
Individual titles. Okay.
They said released over the coming few years. So they'll come one at a time, I assume. And then that's David Jaffe, legendary game designer. And now, Jaffe, you were also on my mind. Why? Because Anthony Mackie went on stage to confirm that Twisted Metal Season 2 would be coming to Peacock. And I thought of this specifically because what you said was that if there was a second season, you will get your cameo in it. And this is what I said on the show, and I'm very, very excited about that. So I'm wondering if that came to mind for you too.
Well, I was like, fuck, I got to get on a plane. But that said though, I mean, I had no idea it had been renewed. I'm not really in that loop, really. I talk to the creators every now and then. But yeah, I was very excited by it. And then right afterwards, I think it was, let's just say a few moments afterwards, when Last of Us got the best show, or the best adaptation or whatever, I was like, well, yeah, I knew it would. And I loved the Last of Us TV show. It's great. But I was like, motherfucker, it still hurt a little bit. But I was thrilled to see that. It was exciting.
Yeah, because we said, and I said it to you before, that I think the perfect roles for you would have been either the dude with the big dick that's in the
you know what I'm talking about? What's
Mr. Slam or whatever?
Mr. Slam, yeah.
Or the map seller, I think would have been a good for you too.
Somebody wanted me to be the old homeless guy in his underwear sitting on the side of the road.
That would be. I can't wait to see what they're going to do with you.
I don't know if they're going to give me something great. Before, what they originally offered me was like, you get to be a corpse in a freezer in the fast food restaurant that Mackie and the girls stay in.
Oh, in that. That's lame. You got to get like a speaking role. In my
give me
opinion.
a fucking SAG card, motherfucker, so I can strike with you guys.
That's ridiculous. This is your IP. That's how that would be, baby.
Me and Scott and Kellen. There's a lot of
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, yes, thank you for having me. It's good to see you. We missed you last night. I saw that you guys were busy, but it was me and Gene and Gaz were smoking the dope. And I tell you what, I'm going to tell you something. I'm too new to dope is what it is, because people like, and I don't know how you do it, Colin, but people like Gene and Gaz, I'm sitting there going, you guys aren't high. And they're like, sure we are. And I'm like, but when I get high, it's like a Cheech and Chong movie, right? It's like, you can't, I smoke I do the whole goddamn pen, and because that's why else do it if you're not going to get shit-faced high. And I think they were like, oh, we didn't know it was going to be like this. We thought we were just going to be chilling and watching the Game Awards. And I'm fucking there like, Gene, why don't you smoke? And he's like, I just had cancer. I just had lung cancer, motherfucker. And I'm like, oh, yeah, lung cancer's bad.
That part.
Yeah. So
Fair enough.
But it was fun. But we missed you. And hopefully we'll have a chance to smoke some dope soon.
Yeah, I'd love to be on. I mean, you and I have so much to talk about. Just politically,
absolutely. Are you wearing the Wonka shirt today because the movie? I hear the movie's actually pretty good.
No, I actually it's like one of the 5 shirts that I wear right now.
Oh, gotcha.
I've said before, I have like 4. I literally have hundreds of t-shirts, and I ordered a bunch more. I get them all custom made, and I ordered a bunch more, and they're all coming. So a bunch of new game logos. I got an Enix shirt coming, which I'm really excited about.
Ooh, and as in Square Enix.
Yeah, like, but just like, remember the old lowercase e?
Yeah.
Going up. So I have a bunch of those, but I never really go anywhere, and I have all these t-shirts, and we have a walk-in closet in our bedroom, and so I just have stacks of t-shirts on these shelves. And basically, Micah will do the laundry and then put the last 5 that I wore on top, and then I just keep picking off of it until I deliberately have to go in and be like, all right, I got to freshen it up a little bit here. Because you'll see shows where I'm like wearing my East shirt or something like in a bunch of different ones, because I'm like, that's just in circulation right now. So the Wonka
Right.
shirt just happens to be in circulation right now. I am excited though to see the new film. I want to see it. I think it's cool that it's the same. It's supposed to be Gene Wilder as a younger person. It's the same character. I love that. And people were busting balls. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Probably only behind Interstellar and like Empire Strikes Back. This is like, and I don't even like chocolate. I just think it's fucking hysterical. It gets more and more funny the older I get. The interstitial scenes are hysterical. You don't even get them when you're a kid. And that's like half the movie. But people were busting balls on the trailer and his delivery of like, I'm Willy Wonka. And I'm like, I like it. I think it looks cool.
People say he's like going to get an Oscar for it. I mean,
he's a great actor.
He is.
They just got to be careful with putting him in too much shit. He's becoming like the male Amy Adams.
Take the fucking money, baby. That's what it is. I mean,
oversaturated.
But Dune, I thought he was great in Dune.
Yeah, he was good in Dune.
And his sister's in a TV show on HBO called The Sex Lives of College Girls. It's a little less, filthy than it sounds. It's not a porn or anything. It's kind of like Sex and the City, but it's like for like they're 20-year-olds.
I haven't heard of that.
It's really good. It's a funny show, but his sister's the main character, and it's very strange because you can tell it's like a girl Chalamet.
That show sounds horrible. What time is it? What channel is it on? I'm like,
when is it, Jesse?
That sounds appealing to you?
It's like it's like Mac in Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I love that scene where the girl's talking about like porn, like there's like revenge porn online, and he's like, "Oh, that's so horrible. Where is it?
Where? Yeah, it's on HBO Max. It's called The Sex Lives of College Girls, and it's funny. I mean, it's a good show.
All right,
it's from Mindy Kaling. Okay, sorry. Let's go.
Oh no, it's okay.
She's great.
Yeah, she's funny.
She really is great.
All right, we have a good selection here of topics. We have obviously a great cast of people today. Thank you guys for joining me. I know it's a busy time. Where do I want to start? Actually, Cog, yours actually hit me when I was reading it. Just I'll leave it to you. You take it away. Yeah. Let's start with you today.
This is interesting because Dagan, don't take offense to this. This is gonna hit home. But as a sports guy, the big game coming in was, obviously most people know me as a San Francisco 49er fan. It was Philadelphia Eagles versus 49ers. And in the preview of kind of like what a potential NFC championship game. Now, prior to this, a lot of Philly fans, have been on my timeline. And they've been like, we're going to smack y'all. Y'all going to know who we are, that kind of energy. And my energy is based on the circumstances. Hey, we didn't play you guys with a quarterback. So last year, we lost to them. So I'm coming into it, but in my mind, I'm humble. I'm not engaging, right? But dudes are on it, like, yo, talking smack. It's crazy. And it's funny based on the result, because obviously the 49ers won in decisive fashion in Philadelphia, which, I knew was a big win. But what I thought was interesting is I'm the type of person that when, like, even if it's a big game and I know if you're my man, that's your team, yo, GG's, bro. GG's, y'all got us this time. It's cool. And what I noticed was a lot of these people, and even random people who don't even engage with me, who would antagonize me, silence. So there's a part of me that was like, I should just put out a tweet like, yeah, where y'all at now? Like, where's all that lip? Where's that talk now type energy? I was so tempted to press it. I'm like, God, you're better than that. You're bigger than, you're mature. You ain't got to engage there. In their heart that the beating you put on them, they felt that. And some people did say, you know what, Cog, GG. What I wanted to bring this to you guys in the sense of, don't have to apply it to sports, but even in life, when maybe you're on the opposite side of it, and, your team loses, or let's just say in life with opportunity, right? You're my man and we're both going for the same job or something like that. And that person wins out. And in your heart, you really wanted it. But how do you handle either the sportsmanship aspect or just being gracious when something you feel you deserve or really want with all your heart kind of thing? Because I think it's an interesting dynamic. And the last thing I'll say is, for me, outside of sports, there are times when it's like, man, I really want either a specific opportunity. I'm thinking about Solve in general and stuff like that. And maybe he got it, kind of thing. And my first inclination is to feel sad for yourself. But the other time, it's kind of like, you know what, though? My man got it. Congrats to him. It's not my time right now. it'll come when it's supposed to come. So how do you guys internalize that? And actually, I'm going to start with Jaffe. I'm curious, Jaffe, how you internalize this stuff.
Yeah, I've never had a failure, so I don't really know what you're talking about.
But if you did.
If I did.
Theoretically.
You know, I agree with you in the sense that, you know, intellectually, and then that eventually seeps down into just your being, and it becomes more than just an intellectual exercise. I think, you know, you live long enough and fail enough, you start to recognize the value of it. And failure doesn't mean you didn't get the job your friend got. But in terms of, it's like when you say it's not your time, for whatever reason, some of it has to do with you and some of it has to do with just the planets not aligning. Things didn't work out the way you wanted it to go. But that doesn't really mean anything. You get back up, you know. So fundamentally, I think those disappointments, once you recognize it's not personal, I think kind of don't bother you as much. But I also will say this idea of not expressing your true disappointment, I'm not a fan of that. Like, I don't like this idea. Like, I like the idea of not being an asshole, right? I mean, like, so I'm an Auburn fan. Auburn rarely wins. They're just terrible. But I love them, you know, for nostalgia reasons. My dad went there. We were an Auburn family. And the Alabama fans are just the biggest group of fucking dicks in the world. And what's funny about them is it's, you know, it's like, motherfuckers, it's kind of like betting on Mike Tyson in a boxing match in his prime. It's like, yeah, of course you won, you idiot. Wow, you got behind the obvious. You know what I'm saying? I vote for Auburn. You know what I mean? So if Auburn wins, it's a real celebration. But anyway, the point being is that I like being able to express your sadness and disappointment. Because I think sometimes, like when they show the Oscars and it's the winner goes and then they show the other four and we're supposed to be like, yeah, it's like, no, it's every now and then an actor will be like, oh, you know, they're happy for the guy who won, but it's disappointing. Right. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is, I love, though, there are a couple of viral videos. Some of them are like adults and some are like little leagues and stuff, where if I remember the one that I'm thinking about, good, Jaffe, you idiot. If I'm the one I'm thinking about right now is, I think it was like a junior high school baseball championship game. And the pitcher was best friends with the batter, and the pitcher swung out the batter, and the pitcher's team won the championship. But while all his team was celebrating, he ran over first to his friend and hugged him and you know, was just like, oh, you know, good game. And, you know, and I just thought that was wonderful. I thought that was really heartening to see, because it's an acknowledgement, of it, you know, it could have gone either way. And even if it didn't, it's just a game, and we had a lot of fun, and it sucks. I know you're hurting, but here's a hug. So that's my take.
Fair enough. I get where you're going.
Yeah.
Let's see who's ready to open. Colin, curious. How do you deal with this?
This ties into something I've reflected on before on the show, Cog, which is, I think that you have to have different calibrations internally and externally in how you react to things. So, for instance, like I internally, and this is just honestly, like I'm rooting against a bunch of situations and people inside, right? Like, no doubt about it. Athletes, teams, people in business, like a series of things where I'm like, I'm paying attention to this. And I want you to, you know, Kirk Cousins, for instance, because of what he did to the Jets, and like there's literally, who's the quarterback of the Vikings, and he got hurt. I don't want that to happen, but right. I hate the fucking Patriots. You know, I hate the Rangers. I hate like all these different things. And I'm always like, anytime I see them, it's like, no, I want you to lose 100%. Except now I want the Patriots to win, because now they are 3-10 and they're going to get a good draft pick. You know, so like, let's pick up a few wins. Let's pick up a few wins here. Right. Let's pick up a few wins here. But I think that you can't, and I was an athlete when I was a kid too. And I lost and I won, but I usually lost. And I've said before, my hockey team in high school was fucking horrible. Like, really bad. I think we won 3 or 4 games my entire high school career. And I was the goalie, and it was tough because I was one of 2 goalies, but you're getting like 60 or 70 shots a game on you. You're letting up 10 of them or something. And it's like we get blown out 10-1 or whatever. And it's like, oh, and everyone looks at you. If you don't know the game, it's like your goalie is fucking horrible, and even people on my team blaming me. I used to get huge fights with fucking people on my team, and we were all fucked up. And I would say that my bad sportsmanship mostly came out there. And I've reflected on this in the past, and I do feel bad about this, but I kind of had said in so many words over time in high school, playing on that team for several years, where I'm like, I grew up on Long Island when I was young, and then I moved to New England, as everyone knows, for 5 or 6 years and to live with my mom. And I played hockey at a very high level there, in travel teams from 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. And I remember saying to my team in high school, I'm like, my team in 6th grade, and I meant it straight up, I'm like, would fucking kill you guys. Like, they would just murder you. It would be over for you, and like, you're all like 16 or 17 and they were like 10 or 11, it's pathetic. But I'm sorry that I let it get to me, because there was just a very circular, unhealthy thing on that team, like where there's just newer players that shouldn't even be playing. Then there was like a few players that were really good, and you wanted to get everyone mixed up in there. And it was horrible. And I think that for my own personal reflection on it, I'm like, I probably should have just been a lot more staid. Like, it wasn't really that important. And so I think about it through that reflection, but then I think about it through pro sports and what you're saying with the Eagles and the Niners, where I'm used to, and it's not like a woe is me thing, but I root for traditionally losing teams in the Islanders and the Jets. They don't win. The Jets haven't even, I follow this awesome Twitter account called Jets History, and they just put up like clips of games with like the stat lines. And it's like, oh, Braylon Edwards, 7 catches, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I'm like, man, that was some time ago, wasn't it? I mean, that's like how many yards we get in a game now. And I see all of that, and it's been 13 years since even a playoff game. It's been so long that there hasn't been a home Jets playoff game in my entire fandom. And I became a fan after the 1998 championship game. So it's a dark and dire thing. So I'm kind of used to it. The one thing I'll say, though, that I was really not sportsmanlike, and still am not sportsmanlike, is when John Tavares left the New York Islanders. And I don't know how much anyone knows about them or hockey, but John Tavares was an Islanders first round draft pick in 2007 or 2008. And he is arguably the greatest player we've ever had, like raw talent player. And he was on our team for, 8 years or something like that. And he was the captain, and very well, everyone loved him, and his number was going to get retired and like all of this shit. And then it became kind of circulating in the last year of his contract that he wasn't accepting the Islanders' terms for like a new contract, and that he wanted to go play in Toronto, where he's from. And Toronto in the NHL is like the New York Yankees, not in terms of their attraction, but they're the biggest team basically. They're also woefully bad, but they have a huge fan base. And he wanted to go play there and play with his friends, and they got this whole thing together. And I made an image of him that still circulates today. It's my image, if you see it. And I made it of, there's a picture. So he tweeted out when he's like, I'm going to the Maple Leafs. I'm sorry to the Islanders fans. The Islanders fans basically threw him away. There's a whole story about that. He gets booed every time he touches the puck when he comes to Long Island. They retired his number with another player that wore the number, so that to give them the finger and all this. It was really quite tumultuous, and we fucking hate him. I made this image of, so when he tweeted out like this thing, I think it was on the Players Post or whatever, that website where players write their letters about their being traded. It's called, you know what I'm talking about, Dagan? It's like called the Players Post or something. It's a website where it's literally just professional players, when they have something to say, they post like a letter there. I'll look it up when I'm done talking, and I'll put it in the thing. But he put a picture of himself in bed as a child with his Toronto Maple Leafs pajamas on. And I took the image and I put the crying Jordan face over his face and like very carefully edited it. And it still circulates to this day and that was probably the most in NHL circles. And that was probably the most petty I ever got with sportsmanship. And to this day, so he's probably been on at least like 7 years now. I hate that motherfucker. Like, I really do. And when we watch the Maple Leafs, I want the Maple Leafs to lose. It brings me great joy to know that the Maple Leafs have never gotten past, I think, the first round in the playoffs since he's joined the team. Meanwhile, the Islanders went to 2 conference finals after he left the team, including the year after he left. It was like, fuck you. He left us high and dry. We were offering him more money, better terms, more years. He turned it all down. So go fuck yourself. So that was a big thing for me, where I was like, I hate that dude. And it went from me wearing that jersey to being completely put off. And still, when I see Maple Leafs highlights or I hear his stupid name, And I want the Islanders and the Maple Leafs to play in the playoffs so bad one of these years. And so that's that. And then I will say this too, that, and this is sportsmanship, is that I think it's okay and even maybe necessary to feel the feelings of bad sportsmanship without acting on them. And I've always said that I consider myself a fairly good loser, except for my hockey experience, because you have to kind of lose. Like, if you're going to be upset, you go to fucking trivia, you're playing cards or something. It's like, you're really going to be upset every time you lose. You lose when you think about it all of the time. So you have to get used to losing. But inside, you're like, damn, like when I'm at a casino in Vegas and I lose a few $100s, I'm like, fuck, inside. But then outside, I'm like, all right, good to see you guys. Thanks for the time or whatever, and walk away from the table. I mean, that makes all the difference, in my opinion. And that goes back to what I was saying about, like, all of the people, I have the memory of an elephant with this shit. All of the people that rooted against me, asked me to fail.
You that dude.
No, I'm totally that dude. I know, dude. I have a little list in my head where I'm like, oh, you lost your job? I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah, but you're like Billy Madison.
You the receipt, dude. He got the receipts. Colin be ready.
Right. Yeah. But the thing is, and this is the thing, though. And I'm honest about it. Maybe people don't feel like this. Maybe I'm just crazy and sociopathic, but I'm honest about it.
Somebody one day. That's what I think.
Well, no, that's Micah.
That might be Micah.
And that's a reference to another where Micah said she was going to kill someone, I think, or she can get away with it. But to me, I'm willing to feel those feelings. I just don't want to act on them. So when someone that hates me, that was like, Colin's a fucking racist or whatever, and then he's like, oh, I got, lost my, you don't want people to lose their jobs. It's not a good example, but he washes out or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to fucking go on Twitter and be like, ha, ha. But inside I am.
You're like, yep, they got him.
And there's a long laundry list of people that have already fallen by the wayside and people I still keep my eye on to this day. And that, I think, giving into that personally allows me to feel like, okay, it's like writing a letter and burning it. You know what I mean? It's like,
I think it's very healthy. I think you're absolutely right. I think
so.
Sportsmanship is important. We live in a society. Shut up, Jaffe. We live in a society where, we have to work together, blah, blah, blah. But I think to not also acknowledge that sadness and anger and frustration, and to not make it clear that exists. I think a lot of times kids will be only told about the external representation of good sportsmanship, and they won't know. They'll feel almost guilty. Like, what do I do with these feelings? I'm not supposed to have these feelings. Like, no, you should have them. Just how you deal with them,
All right, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I have a question though. Of course, I mean, and I hate to be a dick, but everybody. I guarantee you, most people listening to this right now want to know. Oh, kind of funny is on that list.
Oh my God!
Right? You know he's going there. I know Jaffe's going to go there.
Everybody's going there. I'm just asking it, but I mean, I have to assume when you look at their Patreon or you look at, you're like, fuck yeah.
My feelings on it are more complicated than that, to be honest, because it was a brand I founded, and so I think it would reflect somewhat badly on me for them to crater and fail. But I want to be in my opinion, and I'm not trying to be a dickhead, just based on my own metrics and like what I'm looking at, what's most important to me, I won.
Yeah, you did.
And that's a good enough for me. I'm not, so that I don't really stay in that space.
Okay, so they're not on the list.
Not really, because to be honest, because it's like, it's more complicated there than that. But it's like, it was important for me to be bigger. I could have never made this money or done this sort of thing there ever. So like, it's like, those are the things that are important to me. Are they more popular? Like, are they better known and all that? Yeah, I guess, but I don't care about that. I care about like the reality of, well, what's weird about that for you? Like, their videos will do better, or their podcast might be bigger or whatever, but we have more paying patrons by far. We have a bigger.
I'm just surprised to hear you say that you think they're bigger or better known. I don't think that's accurate.
I don't know. I mean, that's just my interpretation. I will say that they're more of a mainstream.
Oh, absolutely.
Thing, and so maybe that's what I'm saying. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to win that battle, but it was not like, as far as I know, and I don't really talk to them, that might not be a battle they ever even cared about. It might just be like all in my own head. I don't know how they feel about me at all.
That's the motivation though.
Yeah, totally. It's all about, people say that in sports all the time, that Tom Brady used to do this all the time and used to be noted all the time. He would make shit up, basically. Be like, no one believed in us this year. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? Everyone believed in you. What are you just making things up? but it's like they have to feed themselves a narrative. And
I was mad at Shannon Studstill for 3 or 4 years. I could not. I was so, and she broke my heart, this woman. I mean, I was so mad at her.
This is the ex-lead of Santa Monica Studio, by the way.
Yeah. And we've since mended fences, and she's back in my graces of, I just adore the woman. She's fantastic. But we had a period there where we fell out, and I used that anger and that frustration to go get funding and start a new company. I was just like, I want to fucking destroy you guys. I mean,
and sometimes that loss and that pain, right, is a driver, is a motivator to greatness and eventual great things. Like, because if this doesn't happen to you, right, you don't become who you are. If this doesn't happen to Colin, he doesn't become who he is. So sometimes it is, in the sports reference, it's like the Niners lost 3 in a row earlier in the year. And in my mind, I'm like, no, that's good. Because you guys were believing your own clippings after beating the Cowboys. You were acting like you were the best teams, and you needed to be humbled a little bit to get back to the greatness I know you're capable of. So I hear exactly what you guys.
What was the Jordan movie, the Last Dance, about the Bulls?
So good.
Well, yeah, it was excellent. And when he talks about, or they talk about his mindset, like the stuff that he would be, the narrative he would be running every single game, which was just a little story he was living in, but it pushed him, to be who he was. Amazing.
Yeah. Let me see if I can do it.
Yeah. Guess you had the 8-3 play this. Hey, last that mean, it just happens to be the number one. I feel you.
Fuck you, Pax. What? Nothing.
No, I told it. So I think that I understand the questions about kind of funny, but I think it's just a little.
That's fair.
A little more complex. I know that I won because everyone has basically stopped busting my balls in some sense in the greater games industry, where like I think I was an easy punching bag for a while because they just assumed I would wash out, but the exact opposite happened, and that makes it kind of hard to fight me.
How does it? You don't have any of these people that shit on you at a PR level, and now that you're a lot bigger are coming back, do you?
Some PR people reach out to me still, but I think most of them know that I don't have any interest in working with PR.
Okay,
and the PR people that do reach out to me never so I brought it up, like Square Enix or Koei Tecmo and like all the Japanese companies are pretty cool. Yeah. Ubisoft doesn't want anything to do with me, which is funny because, and that's for a long time. It's like, I love Far Cry and The Division and all those things, but I don't give a shit. It's like, it seems like, and I've said this before in the past, it's like, we didn't have a natural situation where it's like we didn't have much of a choice. We were cut off from like half of the people we would be able to work with typically on like PS I Love You or something. So we leaned into it. It's not like it was my idea to do that. It just happened to work out really, really well. Like,
I know. I just know some people have treated you badly, and I'm wondering, have any of them come back and they're just fair weather friends? Okay.
No. I think I understand that point. I'm comfortable with that, them not coming back around, and they really, for the most part, haven't. I think it's going to be difficult for people to kind of accept that. To come back, you have to kind of accept that you were wrong about someone, and that's not going to happen. So, and I'm comfortable with that, just because, again, I'm only saying this from a perspective of that it worked. I would have a different opinion if it all went down in flames in some different way. Of course, right? But it just happened to work. And I've encouraged, like the Dukes, for instance, although they have a different relationship, especially Maddie, with the industry, just based on his channel, and obviously with the Iron Lords. But with the Nintendo show and something new that's going to be coming, where I'm like, you do whatever you want. My personal opinion is you cut everyone off and the audience loves it. And all you lose is access, and who cares? But people just feel differently about that. And I might feel differently about it too, had it not been foisted upon me. So I just always want to be honest about that. Anyway, I leave it to you, Cog. I'm sorry I went on there.
I don't think I got Dag on this, man. No. I'm curious.
Yeah, man, you made me laugh with the Philly sports thing.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm going to take it in a non-sports angle, but at first I have to say, Cog, like, you are the epitome of this for me in getting to know you, like win with class and lose with class. Like, you're way too classy to engage in that rubbing salt in the wound thing, even though I know it's tempting. Especially, like, take Philly. Philly mystifies me a little bit because I've been here for 30 years. I'm not sure how the sports culture was here prior to that, but I suspect it's always been the same. It's pretty toxic.
You said it. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's notoriously
it reminds me of other sports towns like Boston and stuff, where it's just the lack of decorum. There's no self-reflection. There's no, let me just kind of look at this and try to like, the bad mojo put out continually year after year is like, just correct this. It's not a good look. You know, and I have to maintain some kind of air of neutrality because my kids were born here.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they're Philadelphians, and thank God up to this point, my son's really the only Philly sports fan in that he loves the 76ers. He's not really into the other sports. And my daughter grew up a Yankees fan, like a diehard Yankees fan. So we got into her in time. But yeah, Philly sport. I love Philly as a town, but the Philly sports culture, I still feel like keeps me from fully embracing the city. And that's somebody who's not even a sports fan necessarily outside of baseball.
Right.
It's just like, you guys got to kind of change your attitude. It's a great city. You guys have great potential, but you got to kind of, we got to kind of,
I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, dude. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that Philadelphia has had a reputation, as far as I understand, going back to the 70s. And I think that kind of just feeds itself. Like, that's what you're expected to do, or you kind of keep that culture. Like Uncle Mike said, when he went to an Eagles, didn't he go to an Eagles Cowboys game in the 70s and literally got like batteries thrown at him or something like that?
Vet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was like 70s Philly sports, Broad Street Brawlers, the Vet, the Eagle, like that. You didn't come in from out of town to see a game, rocking your out of town sports.
It was real. Yeah, they told me.
And he did.
Yeah.
And they got beer bottles thrown at them and stuff. You know, and I do feel, I've been here long enough to know that it is a little bit of what Colin's saying, where they feel like they have to act in that tradition. You know, like they do know better. They are smarter. It's a big city. They're pretty sophisticated people, but they kind of pare it down to live up to the reputation, you know, which is on one hand entertaining and on the other hand just obnoxious. It's like, you're embarrassing me as a Philadelphian. You're embarrassing me. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's not everybody, but it is like a high percent. It's a vast majority. You know, so
I wonder what Benjamin Franklin would think about, like, if he were in, and I mean that in a serious way, because he was such a worldly and interesting person. Would he be down with the crazy? Would he be courtside at the Sixers games? Yeah.
This is the guy who had all the dead bodies in his basement illegally, Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin. Making sure.
Yeah, I mean, really, like, Ben Franklin was a pretty unsavory dude, but he kept it real. Like, outgoing.
I mean, he was doing research. I just want to add some context. I wasn't throwing shade at Ben Franklin, but he did have dead bodies in his basement illegally.
Yeah, he would buy them. Like, he would try to like procure them, and I think they even maybe dug them up and stuff. Who knows?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Anyways,
because he wanted to learn about the human body. Yeah, he wasn't like a serial killer.
But they make it hard, right? Like, Philly sports fans are the epitome of that. Like, they make it hard not to want to dish it back. Like, here, take a taste of your own medicine type of thing. Like, they ask for it. Right. They're like the epitome of that. Really, what I wanted to say, though, was what this reminded me of when you sent your email, Cog, was me working in animation and sort of the culture I've got to know over the past 20 or 25 years, especially on the East Coast, but especially working in television animation for the past 20 or 25 years. And I could really only speak to my generation who came into the industry in the late 90s and maybe our mentors, so 5 years ahead, and maybe the people that we mentored maybe 5 years behind. So that 10-year bracket there. And it's something that the animation industry is hard. It's working in entertainment. It's a lot more blue collar than a lot of entertainment because we don't make phenomenal amounts of money. And it's very much that type of thing where it's few people, it's a lot of people competing for few jobs. It's very niche. It's a very niche skill set. And, it's perpetuated, really, I found over the last 20 years. Like, if you don't love it, you're eventually going to drop out. Like, you have to, your passion is everything. That's what's going to keep you going. And the community is something I've always been really proud of, at least with my peers, because it's the type of thing where you learn early on. It's like 1,000 people typically competing for 100 jobs. And you really quickly realize that you have to adopt this ethos of you win some, you lose some, to the victor go the spoils. And this really hits close to home right now because I was supposed to get a job. I just found out that I didn't get it like 3 weeks ago, which was going to be a 2-year contract on a big animated series based on a children's book for one of the big subscription services. And it was all but sewn up. The executive producer called me over the summer and was like, we're starting in January. You in? I'm like, yeah, sick. That's amazing. And honestly, secretly, not so secretly, I was like, I've already decided that I want to leave the industry. So this was going to be my time to slowly exit. I would have 2 years worth of work and then slowly make my way out. Whatever that, but I do have a battle plan, but whatever that means, it's not important right now. So this was all, this was all supposedly in the bag. And then what had happened was, I guess, which is typical. This is not an odd thing to occur. My producer had his team lined up, and the animation director had his team lined up. And in this case, the animation director won and brought his whole crew on. And none of my guys on the production side got the job because the animation director got his druthers and said, it's got to be my team. And he won. So it turned out that we didn't get, but the thing is, a lot of us know each other on the various teams. And with the advent of the internet and social media too, it's not just all the New York animators who I know personally. There's a lot of these people that I know over the years that I've never even met, whether they live in Toronto or LA, or they're in Seattle or Austin or Atlanta, or they're in England, they're in Dublin. These people are all over the place. It's a big community. And I would say the vast majority of the time, 98% of the time, there really is that spirit, that genuine spirit of attaboy, like, you got it this time, maybe next time I'll get it, or if you guys need another body 3 months into the show, call me up, that type of thing. But it's there's a really classy, typically, genuinely, authentically, I'm happy for you. You got it this time. And that's hard sometimes when I know so-and-so got the job over me and I'm like, well, I'm a better animator. That doesn't even make sense. But then it gets into the whole dynamic of who you know and politics and everything. And you have to kind of just, for me, accept that. It's not always about the skill. It's not always about who would have done the better job. And once you ground yourself in that, and once you really get right with that, I feel like there's a lot of peace that comes along with that.
Good point.
And it's like really a better luck next time thing. And I've been very proud of the animation community because it is hard. It is stressful. You could go long periods without jobs. It's very cyclical. It's feast or famine oftentimes. So the fact that everybody could be that supportive of each other and that kind of culture really means a lot. I think animators, I know I'm a little biased, but I think we're cut from a certain cloth. I think that it takes a special type of person, not to do it skill wise. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I mean, the AI can do it.
We know better than us.
Yeah. I mean, it's faster.
Don't get Colin started.
Yeah, it's not the talent. It's not the talent.
Look at him.
But it's that kind of, it's that kind of spirit that it's the quality of person. Which really makes me proud to be a part of the community, even when things get frustrating and when things get hard. And the fact I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm like, when is this going to change? When are people going to be more hostile to each other, or, get into a thing where they're vying for a job in an ugly way, rather than just like, okay, here's my demo reel. Here's my portfolio. Maybe I'll do a test, whatever it is. And it's always above board. It really is. And I think it also behooves us to act that way because you don't want to hire, you don't want to kind of rub shoulders or work in the trenches with a person who's toxic. And the other thing is people are going to remember that. You're not going to get included on the next production. You're not going to be asked to work on the next show. So that's really what I thought of. And shout out to the animation community. I mean, it could be really hard, but for some reason it just finds good people. There's very few people I could think of in a 25-year career where I'm like, that cat is just intolerable. There's maybe 2 or 3.
Oh my God, you're so lucky.
Like, I would never work for
I worked at IGN and in media for half that much time, and I know so many people that I feel that like where I'm like, ugh.
Thus the list.
Yeah, thus the list.
Yeah, no, well said, Dagan, because I'm sorry.
No. I was going to respond to Dagan, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because you're very fortunate, because in my experience in corporate for over last 10, 15 years, it's very cutthroat. And my experiences have been, I can tell my motivations are different. And the thing I notice, especially in the competitive space for it, people will do what they got to do to step on you. And people will do what they got to do to, either connect with the right people, because a lot of the times it's not about how much skill you have versus the other person. It's about who you know and who you plugged into to get you to where you got to go. And that's the part of the game sometimes that I know I do myself a disservice. I don't like to play. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting, man, because the last thing I'll say to your point, you got me thinking, is just also with losing out and how I internalized it. So when a lot of times I like the hardest thing to do when you really want something, and this was a point I'll say to you, Colin, it really resonated before one of my IT jobs. As a sports guy, one of the dream things was like, oh, I was going to be like an IT job for like the NBA. And I had it like sewn.
Oh, that's cool.
Bro,
Yeah,
I had it
really cool.
sewn. Like I destroyed these interviews. And I'll never forget, you know, like getting to the final round, so to speak, and then you're the bridesmaid. And you're like, damn it. Like, and you want to be frustrated. But I remember one of the key things I did. I said, you know what? Let me meet with them and just say, okay, after the fact, if you have time, what did I miss out on? And take the feedback. And that's the thing that kind of helped me improve myself a little bit. But I'm proud of you, Dagan, that you animators, you guys are nice to each other. Like I ain't experienced none of that. Like that,
yeah, it's never the type of thing where it's slander or he said, she said. I mean, in our industry, very easily, I could email a producer or a would-be director or something, be like, don't hire so-and-so. But that doesn't go on. And I don't even know, like to the degree of like, are we just lucky? I mean, my dad always taught me like win with class and lose with class.
Right.
And I feel like almost everybody I've known in animation to a person has really embraced that philosophy of win with class and lose with class, and always brought their best to the show. Always did 110% in terms of quality. Those are the two qualities I would say. Yeah. And in a very competitive space, I'm not sure that really exists, like in advertising, in Hollywood, in feature films, in acting, whatever other things you want to get into that are highly competitive, highly sought after positions, not too many spots. You know, it's not graphic design where every company has a built-in graphic design agency in their building. You know, animation there's not a lot going on even in the best of times. So yeah, it's something about, you know, just the quality of these people. What I fear is these kids that have come into the business maybe in the last 10 to 15 years that I don't really know very well. Are they maintaining that same air as far as competing for jobs and stuff like that? Or has the culture changed? Is it more competitive and more cutthroat now? I'm not sure, but definitely those people from the mid 90s to the mid aughts, that was a very special group of people who I'm still with largely, you know, that you really kind of maintained that air of, you know, positivity and, you know, just that whole thing of like genuinely feeling like, okay, I missed out this time, but I'll get it on the next one.
I got a couple of questions on this. The first one is, do you think, like I found this in video games where, and I don't know if everybody listening knows the whole above the line, below the line concept. And I know whenever I bring it up, a lot of people are like, that's so disrespectful. And it literally is talking about the people in the budget, that there's literally a line, and it's like, these are the people up here that get paid a lot, the actors, the directors, the producers, and they're, you know, individual contracts, blah, blah, blah. Not union based, whatever it is that delineates that. And then the vast majority of people on a crew are below the line. It's the gaffers, the grips, the guys who do the effects, whatever. I have always found in games that most of the people in the trenches, maybe because they know everything is fleeting and they know it's just a job and they need another job after this job, they tend to be very, you know, for two reasons. One is, I think, because the job thing, they tend to be very much more easygoing, fun to work with, easy to work with. But the above the line folks, I think, are more like Cog, you're saying, with the corporate people. And I'm wondering if it's because two things. One is that I think when you are a craftsman, which doesn't mean you're not also creative. Of course, animators are creative. Your abilities are on display. You know if you're good.
Yes.
You know, but when you're getting into something like directing a video game or pitching a series for animation or, you know, it's so amorphous and it's so based on so many weird fucking things that aren't literal. Look at how Dagan does a run cycle, right? You can't point to it, that I think there's an insecurity there. But I think when you're dealing with the trench folks, it's like, dude, I know I can fucking animate the shit out of this because I do it all the time. I mean, would you agree that there is that weird delineation, but it does exist?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what happens is it's not about the work itself. It's about trying to promote yourself. That's where the competitive aspect is. I am better than that other person in this other way. I just think that the motivations change. And I do agree with you with the below the line are the people I tend to gravitate towards the most. I am probably the opposite of what I need to be for the mentality of above the line, because I still operate in certain ways. I'm a very tactical person. I'm very, so I get where you're going. I think that's very accurate, Jaffe.
Yeah. And then the last thing for Dagan, I mean, I never did with my kids. It sounds like your dad did with you guys, but have you sat your son down, your daughter down, and talked about this issue? It never came up with my kids.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as far as like winning and losing and being a sore loser. Yeah. You know what? You guys remember, do you guys remember being a kid? You're sitting around playing a board game. That one neighborhood kid just flips the board over, gets incensed and just storms out.
Yeah.
That was always so. It's not that I didn't want to win as a kid. And certainly as a kid, I was definitely, until I found skateboarding and art and stuff, looking for that thing that I was good at. And it was like, I'm mediocre at everything. Like it was very Charlie Brown. Like I give up. So I wasn't like the big winner. But when that kid came and stormed off and got all pissed and flipped the Monopoly board over, it's like, dude, it's fucking Battleship. Like I remember thinking that. Type of thing where that's like,
I agree.
You want to make it more immersive. It's like, oh shit!
You agree with that kid?
No, I agree. I agree with that whole notion of like, why are you so serious about this?
Serious.
Well, that's the thing. As a kid, you have the perspective of like almost confusion. As an adult, some kind of empathy sets in. It's like, what are the parents doing to that fucking kid? It's like, holy shit.
Okay,
like,
but I have to say though, this is where it's very fine line between that and the narrative cog that you were talking about that runs in people's heads that don't even have to exist as a real narrative to motivate you. Because sometimes you'll be so motivated out of things that have nothing to do with the real situation that's what you're responding to. It's like, I was going to do this. I was going to be this. If I don't do this, I'm not going to show my mom that I'm really worth, and it's like the person you're working with is like, dude, I just am asking where you want to go to lunch, man. But I mean, I do think that's where a lot of that comes from, that angst and psychological trauma that drives people to success probably also makes them a pain in the ass to work with sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you play to win. That, I tell my kids, I think of Derek Jeter because he was my favorite athlete ever. And it's like, you play to win. You want to win championships, but really it all comes down to, it's the same thing with their academics that I tell them. Look, if you were half stupid, I wouldn't be on you to get A's and get high honor roll and stuff. But you were born with a certain gift. You were born with intelligence, intellect. You learned how to read when you were 3. This is your only job. I expect you to get good grades. But it's not about the straight A's, but you got to put in I expect grit and I expect hard work. I expect you to do your best. And if the best produces A's, that's wonderful. If the best produced a B- this time, and I know you did your best, amen. Like, that's really all that. Jaffe, you know what? You were saying that really hit close to home.
God,
I think
I
there's
wish
a lot
you were
of
my
parallels.
dad. What?
There's a lot of parallels between video games and animation.
Absolutely.
I know that. But you said something that really struck a chord in that there was definitely almost always a clear division between the artists, which the senior people and the executive class and the rulers of the roost, right? Yeah. We refer to as wrists. So I would say everything from like animation directors on down.
Yeah.
Animation directors, animators, designers, storyboard artists, writers would fit into this. Oftentimes in television animation, the producers, especially the creative facing producers, would also fit into this, where they were, it was very cliquey and very relegated between the two groups. It's like the senior group, the ruling class, the executives, the accountants, the lawyers, all that kind of thing. And then the people in the trenches actually producing it. I always felt like there was a big chip on the shoulder of those people because I think despite the salaries and despite the high pay and the positions of power, I think there is some sort of chip on the shoulder bred from the insecurity of knowing that's the talent down there. We can't do it without them. I would have the feeling of you fucking animate it then. You know, I went to school for 6 years for this, and I've been doing it for 25 years.
That's why you guys are pissed at EAI. It's like, fine, chat GPT, make me, but you're absolutely right. I mean, as a guy who had that insecurity, I mean, I was always very secure in the work I provided and the guidance and the leadership and the design and the creativity I brought to the table. But end of the day, what I really knew was fundamentally, if the game failed, every single one of the people, every single one of those people on Drawn to Death, because that game did fail easily. If they wanted to, they went off and got jobs making video games again, and they'll be doing it till the day they die if they want. That failure, as it should, but that failure, those choices sit with me. And even though I have been offered a number of directing jobs since, it's still a sense of, if it doesn't work, I may not be able to ever work again. If it doesn't work for the animators on Drawn to Death, they're like, oh, that sucks. That was a fun team to work with, fun game, but moving on.
They'll go on to the next thing.
And so that, and that doesn't mean that the people in the trenches deserve to be treated lesser, but it might give some insight into why the people above the line are so difficult sometimes, because, they don't have that trapeze swing into the next unless they build it off what they're doing right then. Whereas you guys have your talent.
That's a great point.
I think this is actually kind of what's happening at Bungie.
I was just thinking, bro. I was literally thinking Bungie while Jaffe's talking.
I don't know the reference. I mean, I know who Bungie is, but what do you mean?
Well, just like the reporting from IGN that there's a. Do you not know? Did you not read this report this past week?
I might have, but which one?
It was a report saying that there's like a kind of a civil war going on at the high end of Bungie between.
I did not read this.
So like the story notes that Bungie's structure apparently is one that where there's 5 seats on the board, and when Sony
thing,
and it's clear, like what I'm understanding, especially from Chris, who's like very deep into Destiny, and Destiny just as well, if not better, is that the people at the top will not move away and will not let people ascend, and it does come off to me, because it was kind of like that at IGN in a way too for a while. I mean, there was a point at IGN, it was just like where no one left. Like there was just nothing happening. Like, why would you ever leave anyway? But it becomes stressful at the bottom when you can't move up. And I think a lot of that is based on the threat of maybe someone being able to do it better than you, especially someone internally, because then you have to ask the question of like, wow, this person's always been here, or we've always kind of had this, and why didn't we tap into it sooner? So for people that aren't familiar, Sony, in my perspective, bought a lemon. I mean, I was saying on Sacred Symbols, I'm like, can you get out of this? Not legally and financially, but can you sell this off and just be done with this and take a $500 million loss or something and just be like, we're not going to. And I was using a sports reference on the show saying like, it'd be like a quarterback desperate team needing and like, the dynamics. So you're going to really prod them and you're going to get something out of them. But can you undo that? Because the whole thing is that Sony is saying like, we're just going to come in and take over. And then it's like, so what was the point? Because you hired them for their expertise. And Jaffe, I shouted out your amazing tweet about maybe Naughty Dog can teach Bungie how to make money.
That tweet was I did see that.
And like imagine a situation, just apropos of nothing, this is just coming up, but imagine a situation where you're at Naughty Dog, you are the golden goose. You have this studio come in that is inexplicably purchased and then allowed to stay outside of PlayStation Studios so they can just do whatever they want. They come in and they shut your game down. Then you find out that their revenue is down 50% year over year. They need to lay off 10% of their audience. And the entire purpose of buying them was for their games as a service culture. And now the company that is best known for single player games is going to take the board over of that company. Good guy. That was a great job. All around on everyone's account. Should have never bought that company. I said it over and over again. Sony should never buy companies they don't work with in an exclusive fashion, because you do not know what you're getting.
Neil Druckmann's ability to channel good sportsmanship is probably, being challenged this week. Because if I was Neil Druckmann, I would just be like, fuck you, motherfuckers. Because, I don't know what their response was to Bungie coming in. Maybe, there are days where I go, maybe they're like, hey, these guys have some really good fucking points. We would have shat the bed if we would have launched Factions. Yeah. But my guess is probably not.
Yeah, my guess is Factions is probably perfectly fine and it can be released as is. Remember this, Jaffe, that Naughty Dog hired Fortnite's monetization director.
That's right.
The guy who literally invented how Fortnite is monetized. They brought him over and then he left. after Bungie came in. So something happened. And then you find out that these guys can't even run their own fucking game.
Do you think that was known from within Sony much earlier, and that's one of the things that may have pushed Jim Ryan out?
Yeah, I'm thinking. I've been rethinking the whole Jim Ryan thing,
right?
Like, in motion, because in the beginning, I still don't know. Let me back up and say, it's pretty clever of him to have set seeds the way he did in interviews for them to use that as an exit plan. And the whole thing of saying, like, I hate traveling, I never get to be home, I never get to do what I want. Like, he says this over and over again. He said it for years. Yeah. And so I don't know if canny PR people were like, oh, no, that's so like we got our out. And you can use that as, we know Jen Clark and those guys, they're fucking brilliant with that stuff. They'll find it. And, but at the same time, I'm wondering, like, did you make some bad bets and now we're figuring out? Because remember too, and they haven't said anything about this, but that deviation game is fucking done. I mean, like, right? Like they just kind of, they never even said a word about it. They announced it. They announced this team. They went and bought the other two teams that they did in that initiative with Haven and with Firewalk. But then this other game just goes away. So some bets were made that were bad. And I think in the mid and long term, we just don't have the answers. It's all going to depend on Concord, Fair Games, and some future products, you know? Yeah. And I don't know if those games, I believe that those games will probably be good. I just don't know if there's an audience. I was thinking the same thing during the Game Awards where I'm like, who's going to play all of these games? Like just these same games, you know?
Somebody put up a thing, as they are wont to do after the Game Awards, of like, you know, the first party Xbox games and then the PS games first party, and it was like 20 and 10 or whatever. But, you know, when I looked at the PlayStation games, you know, and I wasn't a huge Ragnarok fan, but I know most people love it and they're excited for the DLC, which is great. But short of that, other than Wolverine, I looked at all the stuff, and it's the stuff you're talking about, Fair Play, Concord, all that. I'm like, I don't really want to play any of these. But then I looked at the Xbox side and I'm like, Indiana Jones, that looks pretty fucking, I don't know what it is, but you know, I love the franchise.
Machine Games is awesome. So
it's definitely, I don't get why we don't have one of these reporters out there who actually, you know, has all these sources. I need to know, why is this so hard lately to make these fucking games? You know, why is Sony struggling so much to fill a pipeline? I get games take longer, and I understand all that, but it's just like, what is happening? Why? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, do you have a theory, or do we have any insight into, oh, well, it's this, that, and the other? Because I'm like, it's games, man. It's not launching a fucking space shuttle.
Yeah, I think again, in the mid and long term, we just don't know. I think in the short term, it's clear that they've made, when Sony makes a $3 billion or $4 billion bet, it's substantial for them. And that's money that can't be spent on other things. And I think what I was wondering about the Bungie sale was someone else sniffing around? Because that's the only reason that I can think you would buy them quickly and not have all the information you need. And that happens sometimes where it's like, oh, no, fuck that. That happened actually with Codemasters and Take-Two when EA came in and was like, no, we'll give you $400 million more. And they're like, oh, we're out of this deal. And we're going in this other direction.
Maybe the Activision Blizzard deal was just so pressing down.
Yeah.
And we got to do something big.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, please go.
No, I would just say, I know for a fact Microsoft was heavily interested in Bungie. And then when those documents came out on the M&A, as far as, you know, the pluses and minuses to acquiring them, we saw a negative was like burn rate and maybe their over-evaluation of what they're really making, right? And I think that plays a factor into it. Then we do know that ABK wasn't on the list. So to me, ABK seems as something that just kind of fell in their lap. Oh my God, they're going through this crisis. This is going on. Immediate pivot. And maybe Bungie gets left at the altar, right? And then, again, this is all theoretical. You know, now with Sony maybe internally knowing, hey, okay, we could potentially lose ABK and Call of Duty. We know how much value it has on it. We may need to do something to supplement, and maybe that kind of initiate. We know the talks happened before, but maybe that accelerated the finalization of them trying to get Bungie to try to attack the live service thing. But it is interesting. But to your point, I think there has to be serious questions about, you know, what is going on with them right now, and to you, like, did we get a lemon kind of thing, kind of energy.
I just think they should get out of this if they can. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. It's the first time you bought a studio that truly didn't make any sense from the beginning, and you had this idea of what it can do for you. And remember, the other studio you can describe like that would be, they renamed themselves, what was it, Blue Koi or whatever the hell, the mobile studio, but they were Savage Game Studios. It's like they haven't released anything either. It's like because you went out and bought this random company and were like, we need a mobile game, but that's not the way they typically operate. I don't know. We're way off topic, but I just but let's stay in. Are you satisfied with the?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is great.
We'll stay in the gaming space. I'll go with mine next. And by the way, Dig, you were saying you play to win the game. I was thinking of course, Herm Edwards.
Yeah, you play to win.
Yeah, you play to win the game. Old Jets coach.
Classic,
great classic. One of probably the 10 classic post-game press conferences of all time.
Yeah, him and then Dennis Green. We had him.
Yeah,
we let him off the hook. we all what they thought they were.
Yeah, and then of course the playoffs.
Oh, this is Jim Moore. Classic.
All right.
Classic.
So I threw this out there. I was curious what you guys thought, and I didn't want to look anything up, and I don't know if you guys did or not, but I just wanted to shoot from the gut to see what you guys thought of this one topic. What is a role-playing game? Like, what is an RPG? And I was thinking about this through the lens of the way people, I think, would typically describe them. And I've said this many times in the past, but I'm going to really go into it a little bit more here, which is that based on the rules that we've given, I think, as an industry and as an enthusiast, group of enthusiasts for the term role-playing game or RPG, Madden is a role-playing game. And there's really no other way around that. And I wonder how, if it does it, in your mind, does it imply a fantasy setting? I remember thinking that when I was a kid, and things slowly had to break that. Phantasy Star was probably the first thing that broke that of me, where I was like, okay, there can be this doesn't necessarily, because I was playing D&D and I was doing all these kinds of things, and it's like, okay. And I know things like Cyberpunk existed in the 80s with the board game, or the paper and pencil game. But for me, I was like, oh, okay. And then Star Wars role-playing game, the paper and pencil role-playing game, I was like, okay, so it doesn't have to be that. And Star Ocean and all those different things, Front Mission and whatever. And then slowly I was like, okay, it doesn't have to be turn-based. Now, games like Final Fantasy IV kind of planted that seed in us with active turn battle, but when you get to games like Brave Fencer Musashi or Alundra, or even the way you look at games like Zelda, and you're like, okay, so it doesn't need to be turn-based or menu-based. And I in my mind, I'm like, we got to do something. I think we have to do something generally about many genres, and maybe we can talk more about that if you guys would like. I've been lamenting a lot the term Soulsborne, because I'm not into those games really, and I think that term is being used so loosely that it's putting me off of games that are probably not really Soulsborne. And a recent example of that is The Last Faith or whatever, The Lost Faith, that new 2D beautiful
2D game.
Yeah, it looks like Castlevania, but it's described awesome as a Soulsborne. I'm like, okay, but is it? Like, is it really? Because I remember people saying that about Dead Cells. And when I played Dead Cells, which I really liked, I'm like, this isn't a Soulsborne. What does this word mean?
Well, that's the thing. I think thematically that game is very much, I mean, it's basically 2D Bloodborne theme-wise. It's set in this kind of, Cthulhian, Victorian, Dickensian environment. That's what I assume people meant when they're calling that game a Soulsborne. But also, sometimes it means if you die, you drop something and then you can go back. But if you die before you get back, all your loot is gone. I mean, yeah, there's a gajillion little things that could be what the person's talking about when they say that.
I just wanted to kind of go over this with you guys. I mean, we really can take it in any direction. I think it's funny. I say this over and over again, but it does happen in other industries, like in science. I use the example of, for instance, of when Pluto was deplanetized, and then it was like 2006 or whatever. That was an official thing where scientists in this group that's commissioned and sanctioned and all this kind of stuff there, we need to have, or if you want to get really crazy, like the Geneva Convention about war or something, like there needs to be, we need to get together and identify what these things mean. Remember on the old NES cartridges, how flippant the use of genres were in the old NES run, where it was like, adventure series or whatever. And it's like, but an adventure game, this isn't an adventure game.
Right.
Right. Like, or I bring up often the Metroid Prime argument at IGN, which was a famous argument we had there and talked a lot about, which was like, is Metroid Prime game a shooter or an adventure game? Right. Or is it its own kind of Metroidvania? Can you even have Metroidvania in 3D? Is that even a thing? And then I remember when Darksiders came out, that people are like, this is a 3D Metroidvania. So then that broke that whole mentality too. So I just think it's like action, adventure. What do these things even mean? So I wanted to kind of circulate it around role-playing game and see what you guys thought of that. And do you agree with the premise that, in my opinion, Madden, what isn't a role-playing game about Madden? Like, what isn't? It's literally turn-based.
It
statistical.
It depends on what you mean, right? Here's what I'll tell you, because I always got frustrated by the term, because when I was coming up with D&D, and I didn't play D&D, but I was very in the culture of it. I just didn't have anybody to play with in Alabama. Not that nobody in Alabama played. It doesn't matter. The point, though, is that, I loved the idea of it. And I love the fantasy, and I love the promise of the narrative and the story, and you go on this great adventure. And to me, that was role-playing. But when I started playing it with video games, role-playing seemed to be a lot more about stats and upgrading and collecting items. And I'm like, well, that's a fine, little peripheral activity, but I thought this was supposed to be this big adventure I'm going on. And so when you say Madden, I agree it's an RPG if you're talking about the people who define RPG as putting points and stats into characters and seeing those characters change based on those decisions. And there's a meta like the World Series, the Super Bowl that you're working towards, like the big final boss. I 100% agree. But even that, though, when you say it like that, you're clearly using the term RPG to refer to what Modern Warfare is as an RPG, right? Which is all the stats and everything like that. I think Zelda, the newest Zelda, is probably the least of all the RPGs of those two games. It's more of an adventure game. So it depends how you mean it.
Well, I was going to say, Jeff, wouldn't you agree that in my experience, Zelda was always used as an example of explicitly not being a role-playing game, even though it felt and acted like one, and people kind of accepting that. And I never really, to me, I always internalized that. If you think about like Link to the Past or really any of the games, it's like, okay, so there really isn't there aren't statistics in this game. There are back end. Nope. You have like the
only thing you have is character growth with the hearts. That's the only real
right. And like with the tunics, you can take less damage, and you get the heart pieces, like you said, you buy the different equipment, but you're not leveling and all of that.
Yeah, and even those heart pieces are based on finding them. They're not based on getting better at the combat.
Right.
So
it's always interesting. There you go. I'm sorry.
Oh, and it's not a party typally. You're assuming
that's true. Okay, so is that another important thing? Because then that would be like a game like Ys wouldn't be a role playing game after that, so that can't work.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm talking about. It's like, I don't, we love this stuff. Well, I mean, think about Mass Effect, especially a game like Mass Effect 3. So which Dagan hasn't played in, I won't spoil it, but Dagan's only played the first Mass Effect. And I think everyone agrees the first Mass Effect is the only true role playing game of the 3 games. By the time you get to the third game, it's really a linear action shooter with some side quests. And really much less about the role playing. And I hated that. I loved getting the role playing, like, oh, you searched this little thing, here's 10 experience points. Oh, you succeeded in this conversation, here's this. And they kind of removed that probably through playtesting to the point where I don't know that it's really a role playing game anymore. It actually kind of feels more like it's like just a third person shooter in some sense. And so I don't know Cog, where are you on this? Especially because you like your Western role playing games. Now and I think Western role playing games complicate the situation greatly. Because this is all about specifically perspective and also settings. Like, I'm not saying this didn't happen in Japan, but generally speaking, 3D open world Western or sci-fi settings outside of games like Phantasy Star really do come from the West mostly, while there's this more ethereal, what do they call it? Isekai sort of sort of thing going on over there. So I wonder what you make of it more from a Western perspective, an Obsidian fan, a Bethesda fan, whatever. Where do you identify this, or how do you do it?
The lines have blurred, but you're making fantastic points. I think that, for me, I'm going to start with my history first. My sensibilities, what I thought it was I came from the Phantasy Stars and, turn-based, what is considered a JRPG now, that is traditional role playing and, the investment in the character on some level, right? From a statistical standpoint where you are leveling, you are showing improvement, and you are building into this character.
Can I ask you something real quick about this? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I need to ask this before you move on. So, because you said you started with Phantasy Star. So is it possible that your seed of what role playing is actually not fantasy, but sci-fi, which connects to your love of Mass Effect and all those things? Or is that?
I think that's part of my history. And then I realized as I played other games in other settings, that could be RPG as well, right? Because it's like, I'm not locked to this, or I'm not locked to, it has to be dragons and lordly and, like these specific tropes kind of thing. So I think that's where it is. But ultimately for me, on a base level, it's character development. It's the growing into something and building something into. You've taken this character with this journey, and you are way stronger or invested statistically than when you started. It's kind of how I look at it on a base level. And then obviously there's an antagonist that could be created, or the person could have their own motivations and stuff like that as far as the story. But that part I always felt was like the gray area. But you make a fantastic point, because I think what I see now, like the Mass Effect point you made is, to me, excellent. I am a Mass Effect 2 fan, admittedly. But to the Mass Effect 1, because I had a podcast, shout out to Ainsley, Hogue Law was on it, and it was the Mass Effect 2 versus 1 debate, who's the GOAT, so to speak. But the points that the Mass Effect 1 guys made that I have to admit is what you said, which is, that was more of a traditional, what I consider RPG, investment into your Shepherd, that, you had Paragon Renegade, but you had those, the class is also the engineer, and then 2 kind of became hybrid and more of a cover shoot. I have to admit that. It pains me to say as a 2 fan, even though I feel 2 is better, I understand that. So that, to me, on a base level, is kind of what an RPG is to me. But yeah, I think the line has blurred significantly. And I'm glad you brought this up, because Jaffe, you resonated with me specifically. Your comment when it came to the Game Awards and genre defining, and how the miscategorization of certain
horrible.
Yeah, I have to go in. And I agree that I think the lines have blurred so much that we're shoehorning things into categories that don't really have anything to do with it. And that's why I think it's so confusing right now.
Well, I got to say, though, because my experience with Mass Effect 1, and I did not become I need to go back, but I never played more than Mass Effect 1. And the same thing kind of happened with Knights of the Old Republic, which was, I couldn't get my head around, they were presenting it as action, but it was really based on these numbers that were not necessarily reflected in what I was doing. And so I think even something like Starfield, which I love, Starfield does feel like more of a shooter, but it's got the whole idea of going, I'm going to take these 12 points, I'm going to put 2 of them into my ability to steady my rifle or whatever. And then when you do it, there's that disconnect sometimes of, but I'm doing well, I'm a good sniper in video games. It's like, yeah, but there's this invisible thing called points that you can't really see, that's also affecting your ability, that's giving you a handicap or a nerf or whatever. And I think for some people that's confusing. And I don't know if that's why Mass Effect 2 became more of a shooter. I don't know if that's why some people came to Starfield and they were like, I don't like this. I don't think Starfield is as overt with that as Mass Effect 2 was, or Knights of the Republic was. But I do think, you are asking people to really understand this abstract concept. And maybe because of Call of Duty, they've gotten used to it, but it still is a weird disconnect, right? I mean, that you're aiming and it's totally based on you, but how much of it is the stats and how much of it is your skill? I don't know how they balance that. I mean, does that ever pop at you as something that feels weird, or you've just gotten used to it now?
Yeah, I look at it as like, it's this invisible thing where, like if I don't have the investment, like we talk about Starfield specifically, right? So if you don't have the investment in stealth, like you literally can't go around undetected in the crouch state, right? There's certain things, based on the skill points and the way they're allocated kind of thing.
Yeah, but you just can't do it. But once you can do it, what about you can't do it well? Then do you blame yourself, or do you blame the numbers?
A lot of the times with what I consider a traditional RPG, if you have not invested high enough in the skill, then I would blame it in where I'm allocating. That I didn't properly invest in this, why I am failing in this, as opposed to myself, where it's a skill based thing on how you execute.
I just find that so confusing to know which one, and how do you tell the player, hey, it's not you, it's me. It's the numbers. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority there.
Dig, where are you on this? How do you kind of identify this term over time, going back to the 80s, and how do you feel about genres generally in the way we identify games? I I think we use two terms just too loosely. I really do feel like we need to figure out a way as a community to better identify what games are and have agreements so that it's obvious what things are. And this is not a problem in a lot of other mediums. It's pretty obvious what a horror movie is and like what a action movie is or a thriller movie is, I think. And sometimes those things go together and you have hybrids like mystery thrillers or sci-fi action and all the rest, but it's pretty well delineated. I think that here there's just too many questions about what this term means and it frustrates me.
Yeah, I like you talking about it in those terms. Like there's slasher films and there's psychological horrors, right? It's like it's kind of broad. I mean, I thought of two things with this topic. The first thing was nerds. I knew so many nerds growing up. When I was in my early to mid-teens, skateboarding.
Animator of cartoon says what?
Oh, I'm the biggest nerd.
Yeah.
But here's where I kind of sidestepped the nerd thing somehow, Jaffe. All the kids I skated with in high school, late in junior high to high school, they were all big tabletop gaming RPG nerds. And it's because 4 or 5 of them had older brothers who were huge RPG nerds, huge D&D nerds. And these guys, these older brothers were like really cutting edge for their time, like tabletop gamers. It was like D&D, Shadowrun, Warhammer. I remember when Blood Bowl came out. Mm-hmm. And it was like this whole thing of like football meets Conan the Barbarian. Yeah. These guys had nothing to do with any kind of sports until I was like, they're interested in the football thing, but their whole lives were like comic books. Comic books and role-playing games, tabletop gaming. That was like their whole world. These guys, they were probably like 3 or 4 years older than me. As I was coming into high school, they were leaving, and they kind of brought that upon their little brothers. And like everybody would, somehow, I don't even know. Colin and I marvel about this often. I never sat down and played a tabletop game, role-playing game ever. But the cool thing was, it always did seem kind of interesting. It was like, all right, this board game meets theater. I don't know. You're assuming the persona. So by the time I discovered RPG via video gaming, I already knew what an RPG was. So Colin and I were talking about recently on Knockback. I didn't get into JRPGs until the 16-bit era, until the SNES. Somehow I had never played the early Dragon Quest games, 8-bit era and prior, PC gaming with Ultima and Exodus. I had never played any of those games. So Final Fantasy 2/4 in the East, that was my entree into RPGs, was specifically the JRPG. And I think partially because Final Fantasy 4 was really my first one. Soon enough, I would discover things like Phantasy Star 2. My friend was a big Genesis guy, but I think why JRPGs specifically are very important to me is because I found this. Of course, I acknowledge like there's that model of the RPG, especially in video game form that we talk about. Everything you guys are saying, turn-based combat, assuming a persona, building and customizing a party, grinding for money, buying gear, leveling up, all those things, of course. But what really spoke to me was the very creative and specifically Eastern imaginative world building where you were kind of mashing up conventional Western fantasy, Lord of the Rings, right? With swords and sorcery, wizards and castles and dragons and shit, with other genres like sci-fi and horror and cyberpunk and feudal Japan and kaiju films. And it was this anything goes awesome model that's still somehow cohesive. So it was always really, I think, and also because I was already a huge manga and anime fan, it was kind of the video game version of those things. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes the heroes would be children. It had a very specifically Japanese flavor to it. Okay,
they're not children. She's a witch, and she's 400 years old, and she looks 13, but she's a witch. Dagan.
Let's be careful to say that. Yes, that's true.
we had that same joke. If anyone knows Final Fantasy IV, we just did Final Fantasy IV's Knockback, and we were saying that Rydia, and I guess this is a spoiler if you care, it's a really old game, but Rydia is a character who starts as a child and then comes back to the party and is an adult because she experienced this time dilation, and one of the characters, Edge, has a crush on her, and I'm like, dude, that's a 7-year-old girl. I mean,
yeah. It's the same thing with fucking Shazam and Mary Marvel. It's like that's a fucking pedophile story. It's not supposed to be. But when you think of Mary Marvel, and Mary Marvel in the comics is super hot as Mary Marvel, like the superhero version. But then she's Shazam and she's like 8, and you're like, okay, wait, I don't feel good at all.
Something's not right about that.
Something's all right about that. That's right. So if there's somebody, lusting over Zachary Levi in the Shazam costume, it's like, just be aware. That's a little kid.
That's a kid.
That's a little kid.
You know what the other thing was, though, guy, and this could speak to my age. You guys could kind of relate, I think. It was a nice compliment to all the other games we were playing, the model of the RPG, especially becoming popular in the West. Like whether it was the arcade or the various eras of the consoles, we had action games and fighting games and puzzle games and, I guess brawlers and shoot 'em ups and stuff. More, I guess you could argue, more casual experiences. The JRPG, much higher level of immersion, right? A much steeper time commitment, very engrossing. Really, kind of I guess you could think of it now as like the closest approximation to actually going on an adventure that you could have in video game form. You were going to have to invest a lot of time. So it was a nice compliment to the other things that we also enjoyed, by the way, but it was nice to have a little bit of a taste of everything now. And also the greatest genre to personalize, make you feel like you're part of the action. You have some kind of autonomy. You could put your stamp on it. Your calls matter.
Good
and it's more intimate, I guess, by proxy, where you have you're making more of an impact on the game by your decisions, especially the stuff I grew up with. Really specifically on the Super Nintendo and maybe the earlier PlayStation to PlayStation 2 stuff, where it was like, all right, that really defined not only what JRPGs were to me, but what I liked in a game, which I think, there's been huge graphical evolution and overhauls and stuff like that, but I don't think that's really changed. That's kind of why I'm coming to it, because I don't know, there's something about, and this may be very specific to my upbringing or my friends that I was around at the time or my age, but there were two things we thought were super corny growing up. That was the Western, like the traditional John Ford Western. We were just like, it's really weird and corny. Now I think it's awesome. But back then it was like, all right, that's not for us. And Western fantasy was kind of cheesy. It was before Peter Jackson did the Lord of the Rings movies and kind of realized fantasy on the big screen, maybe for the first time.
What like Kroll? What was Western fantasy?
Conan.
Oh man, I love that. Kroll, Conan, Excalibur. Right. I love that shit.
Yeah, and I get, but I get maybe earlier than that, Robin Hood. All the various iterations of Robin Hood.
A lot of that stuff, a lot of that early attempted fantasy, in my opinion, like looking back at it, comes off like early horror, where they're just not quite there, and it's kitschy and interesting and weird. But like, it's interesting that people like Conan's a great example where I'm like, I don't know about this. And it's funny, even He-Man even had like a fantasy kind of thing to it, which I wasn't like, and that's kind of what turned me off when I was a kid. I was like, this is the one thing I was like not really feeling. I was like, no.
A lot of people from your generation seem to have a hard on for Willow and Labyrinth.
Labyrinth is one of my favorites.
Both of those are horrible fucking movies.
Oh my God, Labyrinth's not a horrible movie by any stretch of the imagination.
It's a horrible movie. It's not horrible for you as a kid for nostalgia, just like Phantom Menace is not horrible if you saw it when you were 8. But it's categorically a horrible piece of filmmaking. I showed Labyrinth. I showed Labyrinth to my kids, 8 years ago, whatever, when they were of age, and they were just like, the fuck am I looking at? I mean, it was so bad. And I was like, guys, I'm sorry. Put back on Frozen. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to expose you to this shit.
Was it the cod piece that was too much?
It was when the guys were juggling their heads and all this shit. And then his little worm, like, hello, I'm a little worm down here. And it's just like,
Wow, I'm shocked by that. We did Labyrinth. That's always been a favorite of mine. We did it a year or two ago, right, Dig? And I rewatched it recently, and I was like, this is awesome. And my personal opinion, I just think it's just so imaginative and weird. But I used to watch that movie when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and then I was obsessed with wooden blocks, and I would build like little labyrinths all over the house. Cool. It's a very deep
Henson. Henson's like Lucas, great world builder, great imagination, but a terrible writer, terrible director. And that's not an insult. I mean,
No.
the guy's a fucking genius, but it's just some people aren't good at some things. And he was not very. Dark Crystal's the same thing. Dark Crystal's a terrible fucking movie. As in terms of narrative, it's a beautiful world. It's a beautiful series of characters, but it's like boring. I mean, maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'll shut the
It
fuck
took
up.
the Japanese to make fantasy cool, right?
I can see the
didn't
look
it?
on y'all's faces. Like,
No, you going
it's
in.
like,
I
it's
love
like you
it.
go after the Goonies next, bitch. Come on.
No, the Goonies, I'm
right
kind
now.
of, I am kind of there with you with the Goonies. We did watch that a couple of years ago, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I'm like, this is a little bit on the weaker side. I'm of the mind that there are some 80s properties where I'm like, are you fucking kidding me with this? Like, with its popularity compared to what it is. And I feel that way about Ghostbusters, where I'm like, it's good.
Yeah,
but like, can
it's
you
good.
shut the fuck up about Ghostbusters? Are you serious?
You
With
gotta,
this? You know, and-
people need to have a pill to extract nostalgia, and then they can actually have a real conversation. Because I liked Ghostbusters a lot, but I'm with you. I was just like, oh, it's fun. But if you hit it at the right age, that defines your childhood.
I feel that.
You know, same with like Caddyshack and all that shit.
Sure.
But
it's very era specific.
I never slice.
Right? Oh.
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, we're waiting. I like when he goes.
Yeah, that part is classic.
This is my friend,
And, you
Mr.
know,
Wang.
knock
No
that
offense. All right.
Yeah.
That's one of my very, don't even get me started.
Looks good on you, though.
We can just do the whole thing. Oh my God. That's one of my very favorite movies too. Top 10.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But listen,
Yeah,
listen,
go on,
guys.
go on,
Science
bro.
fiction, right? It was made cool in the West by Ridley Scott and Stanley Kubrick and
Yeah.
Ray Bradbury
Lucas.
and the Wachowskis and
George Lucas. Come
William
on,
Gibson.
man. Oh my God, he's not saying George Lucas at all.
And George Lucas.
Jeez.
Shout out to George
Gene
Lucas.
Roddenberry.
Notice I
Yeah.
did not say Gene Roddenberry.
Bastard.
But it took the J in front of the RPG. I think it took the Japanese to make fantasy cool. I really do. I mean, shout out to Tolkien and the original 3 novels and The Hobbit. But there's something about realizing it fantasy for other media that we needed the Japanese
For
to make
other
it awesome.
media, yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon was pretty good, but we were kids. But that was a
That's
fucking
true.
great cartoon.
That's really true. Jaffe, did you see the action figures for those?
Yes,
They're
want
so
them.
cool.
I
want them too.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
But
Finally.
may I speak on JRPGs for a brief
please
moment?
go on. Pontificate,
Yes,
please.
Yes.
The first thing is I liked them, but I did like the Secret of Mana stuff, or more importantly, like Chrono. The turn-based combat was fine, but the random enemy encounters drove me batshit because I'm like because I wanted to have the adventure, and I was just like, Jesus, man, I want to get to the mountain. Suddenly the screen gets all crazy.
Let me ask you this. So do you feel like you brought up Chrono Trigger, but like in a Tales game too, where you can see the enemies and you still go into an encounter? Do you prefer that? Like where the enemies are on the field?
Yes, I like being able to consciously say I'm ready to engage.
Right.
I want to grind or whatever. But if I want to walk from A to B, I want to walk from A to B. And I've gotten used to the random where they still use it, and I can live with it, and I understand the value of it. But it's kind of annoying. The other two things is to Dagan's point about when you got into these RPGs and it was about the world building and the story and the imagination. I don't want to keep bringing up AI, but I'm going to, because what I have found that has been a absolute portal into the future of this is when you go into like ChatGPT-4 and you say, hey, I want you to be a dungeon master for me. And that you can say, okay, I want it to be a cyberpunk world. I want there to be some political intrigue. I only want it to last for about an hour. I want your responses to only be 3 lines, no more, because it gets along. I don't want to listen to you talk all the time. I want some limit. So I can't just make anything up and suddenly I get out of any situation, right? And lo and fucking behold, it does it. And you can sit there, and that's finally the kind of RPG that I always wanted when I was looking at D&D back in the 80s, which is it's simply an imagination storytelling exercise. And as long as you play within the limits of the fiction, it feels like you're really fucking there. So I would advise anybody listening who loves that part of the RPG experience to play around with ChatGPT or any of these AIs being a dungeon master for you, because it really is It's early days, just like MUDs used to be early days, but we went from MUDs to fucking, MMOs, and we went from little simple games like that, like, Night Driver on the Atari, all the way up to Forza now. So this is the beginnings of, I think, procedurally generated narrative that you can experience right now. And it's really cool. That's one thing. The other thing is, when Colin, you're saying we need better definitions. I mean, I think as fans, and I think it's fun to discuss it, but as a one-time creator, I wonder what the value is of having it so strict. Can't you just create what you want to create and enjoy it and label it later?
Yeah,
is it the after fact you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't think it even is up to the people that make the games. Think about, this is an antiquated example, but think about the Dewey Decimal System. The thing I was so fascinated about with that when I was a kid, learning about that when people still used it, I was like, wow, this is really thorough. Like I remember thinking as a kid, like there's these, all the numbers mean something, and the sub numbers and so on and so forth. And I don't know. I'm not an academic literally, but I have an academic style mind, I think, where I'm interested in that happening to games, like getting to that point where we can have some sort of categorization like that. Imagine a Dewey Decimal System type thing where you could tell AI this now and they would pull up the games for you, but it's like, I want this kind of game. Like it's a sci-fi game, meaning that it has this digit in it, and it's a Western developer, so it has this digit in it. And so I don't know. That sounds interesting to me. It's not up to the people that make whatever you want. I don't give a fuck what you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you that the way they're categorized now are nonsensical, especially like on like Apple Arcade. It's like, action adventure, and it's like a fucking match 3 game. And I'm like, what? What are you doing? But no, I agree with that. Was Dewey, let me ask you this, Dewey, wasn't the same Dewey that defeated Truman Dewey?
No, I don't think it's the same. I don't know if they're related. I don't think it's the same person, though.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
Can you imagine people listening going, what the fuck is the Dewey Decimal System?
Yeah.
The fuck is the
dude, I used to love the card catalogs. Like such a unique and interesting, one of a kind piece of furniture that has no use now,
That's right.
I just, it's interesting because I'm so fascinated by getting into a deeper place with getting away from even using. It's like the whole gender identity thing, like just as an example where people are like, can we get away from identifying as a man or a woman without using the term man or woman? Like to be a man is a man. Okay. Like, well, what does that mean? You can't use the term man in it. And so you have to like, what does it mean? Let's get deeper into that. And I think about that with Metroidvania or roguelike or something. It's like, we got to get away from these terms. It's cool. We understand that, but it's going to get to a point, and it is already getting to the point where people have no fucking idea why they're even called that. And we can figure out a different way to say it. Shadow Complex is a Metroidvania.
And roguelite are so different, and I only like one of them. I like the lights, not the likes, but people confuse them and they're like, oh, it's a roguelite. I'm like, no, it's not.
Right.
It's terrible because it's a roguelike, and I hate that.
Right. Saying Castlevania is a Metroidvania is like, that's like saying a man is a man. It's like, I don't know what that means. Like, we got it. You have to. There's got to be a better definition than that. And you only realize it when you're talking about Metroid or you're talking about Castlevania. It's like you're referencing yourself. It doesn't. You're telling people,
Dave
it's a
Rubin's
game, just
rolling
like
over in his grave, and he's not even dead yet.
Well, isn't it funny to think like you are? Someone's like, what kind of game is Metroid Dread? It's a Metroidvania. It's like, what? Yeah, I don't. I have no experience with that. So, and Rogue, we're referencing a game that's older than I am.
I know.
No one has any idea what that even is. Most people.
And what's funny is
probably don't even know that's the reference.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, Legend of Zelda 1 is actually as much of a Metroidvania because it's the same. I mean, when most people say Metroidvania, they're basically talking about a game where you are blocked off from access to the map until you gain a certain ability.
Right.
I mean, the Zelda did that in 85 with the very first Legend of Zelda.
Exactly.
But for some reason, it's gotten attributed to Metroid in Castlevania. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah, because I think it's perspective. I think that has to do with the perspective, which is the whole thing I was saying, like breaking the mold of being like Darksiders. Oh, yeah, okay, I guess because even when Shadow Complex went 2.5D, we still understood it in premise. It's like, okay, yeah, because to me, Metroidvania is non-linearity and backtracking, and
Backtracking.
But that's and Zelda's the first Zelda's a great example. You can still look at my fact from high school today on Game Facts. One of the best things about that game is you can do so much shit in that game before you even go to the first dungeon. You can get like the second best sword and like a new tunic and all these different items, but you could also never know to do that. And maybe that's also an intrinsic part of role-playing games, which is not part of Metroidvanias, because you cannot go any further without every item in a Metroidvania, whether you're playing Ori or you're playing whatever.
Or Baldur's Gate, which is like, or Starfield. I finished Starfield twice, and I haven't even done like some of the missions people tell me I should do.
It's insane. It's just the scale. It's insane.
Well, all right, you brought up Baldur's Gate. This is a great example. The CRPG. This is an entirely different thing. I always say I don't like CRPGs, and I don't. I know what that means, but I think that term is even not elegant enough to. And by the way, what I'm saying when I say CRPG might not even be what's in your mind's eye when you think about it.
What do you mean?
Usually menu-based, like a menu-based click and real time. So you're moving through.
Diablo 4 is a CRPG?
Yeah, Diablo 4. And I think Baldur's Gate 3 is turn-based, but I think the old Baldur's Gates weren't, right? And so
I don't remember.
So that might not even be a great, but I look at it as mostly real time and clicking menus, like having 10 things down here and 10 things up here, and you're constantly just waiting for things to up refresh or whatever. And
yeah, but I mean, you get to such granularity. Like Diablo 4 then certainly is a CRPG, but I say I really like CRPGs, and as much as I like Diablo 4, I can't play it for more than 4 hours and I'm done, because the inventory management in that game drives me nuts. But the inventory management in something like Wasteland 3 or something like Baldur's Gate 3 is fine. So is that a subgenre of the CRPG where it's inventory has a higher percentage aspect of what you're going to be doing with your time? I mean,
this could be the nesting of the Dewey Decimal System type thing we're talking about, where
absolutely could.
Yeah,
I'm going to start right now. I have cards and
oh my god, yeah, start getting 1.1.1. And just start.
Kids are going to love this.
I know they're going to dig this. This is what the kids love. I wanted to ask you guys this question as we exit. A challenge that we're experiencing at Lilymo as we work on our role playing game from a marketing perspective, and I was curious what you think of this. I am comfortable. I want to invent the term within the realm of what we know of JRPGs at what I would call JSRPG, and that would be Japanese style role playing game. Because I think that does mean something. We do know what that means, and I would consider a game like Sea of Stars or RFL as those kinds of games. They read like they're from Japan. You would never know they weren't Japanese unless you looked at the credits or knew something about it going in. And I'm comfortable calling ours that. Our game looks like something and will play like something from the SNES that was made in Japan. I mean, straight up.
So the only difference with the S is that it's a JRPG, but it was made somewhere else.
Right. Like you don't want to call it a Japanese role-playing game, I guess, if you're not in Japan. Not even being Japanese, I don't think that even matters. Being in Japan, I think is at a Japanese studio is important. But I also know that I don't know who it was. It might have been Kamiya or something saying that they looked at was it him saying?
Yeah, I think it was almost like a negative connotation associated with it, that it had a stigma that when they heard JRPG, they took offense to it as if they are lesser than. And I remember, even though we in the West may have said looked at it with a more positive, outlook.
Yeah. When was this?
The comments came out.
I'll look it up. Go ahead, Cock, if you want.
Yeah, the comments came out early, and it was very fascinating because I didn't know internally that a lot of Japanese RPG makers in the East had a negative outlook on the term. They looked at it as you are trying to diminish the type of games that we make in the West. They didn't like it. So I was shocked to learn some developers did not like the term.
That's so strange.
Yeah. So
I say it with absolute reverence.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too. No, me too. And I think that some JRPGs suck. And I do get that there was an era of JRPG that was very bad. And Japan's responsible for that. Their early foray into 3D role-playing games, once they got away from chibi PS1 style, I think PS2 and early PS3, pretty dark time for Japanese development, period. And I think JRPGs suffered from that, but we never when I say Final Fantasy VI is a JRPG, that's meant with respect. When I say Tales of Destiny is a JRPG, Phantasy Star 4, these are JRPGs, but I found the provenance of what we were talking about here, where it goes back to originally. And it was Naoki Yoshida who said, so Final Fantasy 16's producer and Final Fantasy 14's obviously producer as well, saying that he felt, it says, quote, "For us as Japanese developers, the first time we heard it, it was like a discriminatory term, as though we were being made fun of for creating these games. And so for some developers, the term can be something that will be maybe trigger bad feelings because of what was said in the past." And then it was Hideki Kamiya, so old Capcom head, former founder of Platinum. I don't know. He left. I don't know if we know what he's doing now.
He's about to, I think, form up with Shinji Mikami. They're about to do some.
Yeah, get the old band back together. Well, that was Clover, right? Clover Studios. I don't know if all of those guys are still available. That would be the guys that did Okami as well. Mm-hmm. And he said, quote, "For us," oh no, that was the original quote. Kamiya said, quote, "I have a lot to say on this. Just to be clear first, though, I have a positive sentiment when it comes to the term JRPG. Indeed, I think it's something that we should be proud of." And then he said, "In my creative life up until now, there have been two things that have left a huge impression on me, which I still think about to this day. The first of these was a localization issue with the manga Fist of the North Star. Using language to express a unique atmosphere such as this is something that's fairly unique to Japanese creative tastes. It's something that you can't really express in other cultures so well. So when you see it from a localization perspective," he's basically talking about problems with the impression of this. He says, "So it left quite the impression on me when I saw the American version of Ultraman because of how much they focused on reality when trying to match Ultraman's sound effects to his visual effects. The American portrayal of Ultraman was also cool because it made it feel like a 50-meter tall giant was about to launch up in the air. It's not really a case of good versus bad, whether Japanese or American creators created the more positive portrayal of Ultraman. It's more the unique differences in our culture and how our influences affect our creativity. The fact that Japanese creators have this unique sense of what we do when we create content." And he goes into Kratos and God of War and how that would have never come out of Japan. He says that specifically, uses that as an example. And he uses Bayonetta as an example of something that is profoundly Japanese. And so,
both Twisted Metal too. The Japanese couldn't get their heads around it. They hated it. They wanted to change. They came out. Sony came out and said, from Japan, they're like, "Could you change it so that instead of missiles, they're like throwing tomatoes at each other?"
Really?
And I was, but because it is that, and I'm like, but you're the guys that do all this violent anime, but it is this real, like, I love Japanese culture and I love Japanese entertainment culture, but I am very aware that there's a point of it that I can appreciate, but I still don't really understand the intent behind it. Like Dante and Devil May Cry, I think it's great. But I don't really know for the creators where it becomes camp intentionally and where it's something they genuinely think is cool. Like, it's such a different thing.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it, but I don't understand it. Same with like Sora in Kingdom Hearts, I think is incredibly unappealing as a character design. But I get that he's adored, in many places. So it's working for Sony and having Alan Becker, who was part Japanese and lived in Japan for a long time. It was really interesting whenever he would try to explain to us, "Oh, this is intentional. You can make fun of it. You can make fun of what was that game on PS1, Super Big Brother with the dudes in the underwear, the shooter."
I don't even think I remember that.
Oh, Lord have mercy, Colin. Google that right now.
I'm looking it up.
And we were like, "What the fuck?" And he was like, "Well, it is what the fuck, but also be aware that they're aware that it's what the fuck, and there's an intent behind it."
I get that.
Do you have it?
Is it Shoaniki?
Yeah.
Sure.
The bodybuilder dudes that are bald that are flying around fighing a boss with a giant
I know
penis.
Shoaniki. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says it first came out in Japan in 92, the first one. It's a whole franchise.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's elusive, right? Sometimes, like Jaffe saying the Japanese didn't really respond to Twisted Metal surprises me because they're notorious for loving Mad Max and post-apocalyptic.
And they made a great anime Redline. I mean, they've done wonderful car combat, Speed Racer. I mean,
sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, it feels like. It is a cultural thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So anyway, we're we can close this topic out, but I was just thinking about it. I'm thinking about using that term, and I want to use that term because I want to use it.
I like it.
Yeah,
I think it makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah, I think people will understand specifically what it is, and we already have a series of examples of them. And what would you really like? Sea of Stars. It's not sufficient to call it a role playing game. It isn't. I mean, it is, but it's much more than just a role playing game. You can get much more granular than that, and so to call it like a JSRPG, I think would make a lot of sense. I think we would understand that.
On the morning of the Game Awards, it almost though kind of shines a bigger light, on if you're going to worry about the nomenclature of genre, then like I think Cog was saying, you've got to really shine a light on how absolutely ludicrous. It is if you want to go like Sea of Stars last night. It's like Sea of Stars beat Dave the Diver for something. I don't know what it was, and it's just like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it bothers me too.
On what merit? I'm not saying it wasn't a great game, and I'm not saying it wasn't a better game, but you can't even explain, what it is that is making it best. And so, but again, the way they handed out those awards last night,
don't get me started.
It's so fucking clear they don't give a shit about the awards anyway.
When someone shows you who they are, believe them.
That's right.
What that is. It is a promotional show, and the disrespect as a person who loves developers. And here's the next, here's the and off screen, and not even and yet Gonzo is on screen, and for all they got all the time in the world.
I mean, it's a product. It's but it's
let me not divert.
No, it's all good.
I like it for what it is. But Kotaku this morning put out an article and said they said the awards are good, or the show is good, but they should just get rid of the awards and just call it what it is.
Yeah, call it what it is.
Winner E3. And I was like, that's pretty good. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on, my friends?
Let's do it.
Ready.
All right. Let's continue. So we've gone with Cog. We've gone with myself. So Jaffe, let's go to you.
I don't know, before we might have to edit this, but because I know I sent one which we nixed because of the time, but then I sent two and I said, which one of these do you guys want to do?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Whatever one. Let's see. You want to do the second one? Oh
no, I didn't see the second one.
Okay.
So I'm trying to remember what they were. One was if you could go back in time to
that's the one I remember.
Any moment, and the other was just I've started to read so many more books lately that I'm enjoying them more than video games.
Let's do that. That sounds good.
Book one?
I think that's good. Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, I don't mind at all.
All right, so I'll kick it off again, and we'll cut off the beginning of this. All right, so let's get into Jaffe's topic. We go third now to you.
Yeah, so I was without a computer, but my computer was hit or miss for about a month. There was all kinds of shit happening with it, and in that, I don't know why, but maybe just because I was away from the screen all the time, and I game on the same screen that I do work on. And so I started reading a lot more. I mean, I've always liked books, but I have ADD and it's kind of hard to concentrate and stuff. But I started reading a lot more. I've read like 4 or 5 books in the last month, which is for me insane amounts of reading. And I don't know. It's, my kids don't read. I every single night, these kids, we would go to the bookstore, not every night, but we would go to the bookstore at least once a week. We'd pick out books. We'd sit up outside their bedrooms. I would read to them. And I kind of figured they would just, their mama reads. They would have a love of reading. Not interested in a goddamn way. Whatever. Fine. But so, I love reading. I love books. And when I was reading recently, I'm reading this fantasy book called Legends and Lattes, whatever. And it occurred to me, I think, why in some ways I like books more than video games or more than any other medium, right? Which was, I used to try to write prose. I was never any good at it, but I would always get hung up on writing the descriptions because I'm like, well, I need the reader to see exactly what I'm seeing in my mind. And somewhere along the lines, I realized that that's really not what a prose writer does. It's giving you enough information that you can build your own picture that's accurate enough that the story can continue to move ahead like the author wants. And once I realized that's what was happening when I was reading, it really became the absolute best of video games in terms of immersion and linear narrative storytelling like movies and television, because there is a interactive, immersive part of being in a book that you are creating and it's yours. It's, I'm in this cafe in this book, and I know I'm not saying anything that no one said before, but when you really have it, maybe because I am reading so much lately, I start to recognize the pattern. But when you really recognize what you're doing, and that cafe that you're reading about, or that fight on the top of the mountain that you're reading about, is your fantasy. It's your world that you're getting to experience and live in. But you're still being pushed along a really well compelled narrative. I think it's just, it really does strike me as probably the best kind of escapism that exists. And then I also started reading a bunch of nonfiction. Let's see. Look at this fucking thing. I read it's called The Little Book of Aliens by an astrophysicist, right? But I've been reading a lot more nonfiction. I think maybe, and this is great, by the way, he talks about UAPs, but then he talks about sort of where the real work is being done at NASA to find aliens. It's not UAPs, it's the James Webb Telescope, and how it's able to sort of actually get a sense of life on planets outside the solar system that may actually exist. It's really cool. But between this and between like Here's Legends and Lattes, right? Between both of these, I realize that everything else is so dependent on budget. Everything else is so dependent on a number of people saying yes to you. And what I love about this is probably the same thing I love about doing, people are like, Jaffe, why don't you make games anymore? I love my YouTube shit more because I have full control. Like I've said before on this show, I can wake up and I'm like, I want to try this. And I try it, right? Same thing with an author. An author is like, it doesn't mean authors don't have editors and publishers and they're contracted to write certain types of books. But, this fucker woke up and wrote a book about an ogre that gets tired of being an ogre and opens a coffee shop. And no one's ever heard of coffee in their fantasy land. I mean, it's batshit, but it's really good. You're not going to get that as a fucking video game or a movie or a TV show. They'd fucking shoot you down. This book, we're talking about Ghostbusters. This is a great book. I know it's not book review time, but I read this recently, Wild and Crazy Guys. It's all about the 80s comedians. Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, Chevy Chase. It's, so I've fallen back in love with books, and I wanted to sort of shout their praise. I have nothing controversial or interesting to say about them other than I do think in some ways they are better than video games because of those two reasons: the freedom of creativity on the part of an author and the sense of immersion that occurs when you are actually living it in your head versus seeing it on the screen. I concede the floor to you, fine gentlemen of the opposing party.
I gotta say, Jaffe, I don't know, maybe I'm alone on this. Perhaps I am, but I never really thought about it through that lens. That writing is because it's just about the command of language, that it can be literally anything. And I know that fundamentally, but the idea of saying like there's nothing stopping a sci-fi epic from being made, or a fantasy epic, or the smallest, most mundane thing, simply because there's no command of anyone except for the writer, and then ultimately getting it out to market and publishing it or whatever, if you wanted to do that. So I gotta say, I never thought of that. Never thought of it.
Freedom's amazing.
Well, very well said. So I'll answer this, I guess, and throw it to the others, is that I used to be a much more prodigious reader than I am now. And I think that that's kind of waned as I've gotten older. There were certain periods in my life where as an adult, where I read a lot. When I first left Kind of Funny, I read a ton. And there were times in my 20s when I read, but I majored in American history. So I have to find a picture of it, but I had a digital picture back in college, probably 2004, 2005 or something, of my stack of books for one semester, just to show someone like how many books I have to read for the semester. Right. And it was crazy. I read so much. And because that's all you basically do is my history classes in college, a lot of them were literally, you come to class and take notes. You read these 8 or 10 books. Here's a midterm. Here's a final, or like, here's a midterm, here's a paper, here's a final. Like there's no other thing. It's there's like, you know this or don't. Yeah. There's like, it was just like, don't either know it or don't. And you have no idea what's going to be on these tests. And I remember saying I had to do a test. There was this one professor I had that used to put 10 questions and you had to answer 5 of them. And I remember getting to like the 5th question and being like, oh no. And then finally at the bottom 5 I knew. So that was my whole life. And I think that might have maybe turned me off from it a little bit, but I've always wanted to be a writer, and I consider myself a writer. I write indie games. It's different than writing a book or anything like that. I don't think I'd be capable of doing that. I think I realized with the role-playing game that I'm not capable of writing dialogue the way we need to, not because I can't do it, because I really don't want to do that. I like, to your point about writing the descriptions, what I love is lore building and character building and stuff. And that the whole new game is all out of my head, but the intricacies of how people interact with each other, it has nothing to do with me. And I think I'm good at that. And that's why I really embrace doing the Habroxia intro and outro and the secret endings for the games and stuff, is because it's all just lore. It's like, here's what happened. And isn't that kind of cool? And that's
how long did you work on the lore and the backstory of the RPG you're doing? Like, was it like a year process?
No, it was the 3-week holiday break of 2021. I wrote it all. Okay. It's actually, I think I probably never told you this. I was inspired by Amy Hennig because when I used to go see her when she was still at Naughty Dog to interview her or whatever, see games, she always had, and you might have gone there and seen it, she like loved lining everything up in this style of index cards.
Oh yeah,
and it would be like chapter 1. Do you have that too? Do you do that?
That's kind of a standard thing. A lot of people write with index cards to kind of see.
Yeah, I've never learned how to do anything. So like literally outside, I took my writing classes in college and stuff, but everything I know about any of this, I just have gleaned from other people. So I did that for 3 weeks and I wrote it all out. And I've been especially disciplined about not saying even what it's about, because I think the subject matter is super cool, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how people take to it. But yeah, so it took about 3 weeks.
We know it's a JSRPG.
Right. Oh yeah, totally. It's playable.
I'm using it, Colin. I'm making it a thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, we're I think we'll get it out next year in 2024, but we have to see. But yeah, it's again, we want to make games that look like you could have bought them off the shelf then. Not a game that's like Sea of Stars is so gorgeous, but it would not run on an SNES. This game would run on an SNES. If we knew how to program for an SNES, it would.
What are you using as an engine?
Game Maker.
Game Maker's great. They just announced a new deal for just like hobbyists. If anyone's listening and they want to make games, I mean, there's literally a tutorial right now that just went up that will let you learn to make a game. I know it's basic, but an asteroids game in literally 15 minutes with Game Maker. And it gives you a real quick sense of how easy it is to use. But I tried it and I almost immediately was like, oh yeah, I remember I don't like doing this. But if you're into it, or if you're considering a career in game making, do that, because you'll know within the first couple days if this is even interesting to your brain. But Game Maker's great. That's actually
we're happy with it. We used to use an older version of it, like an unsupported version of it, to keep making Vita SKUs. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't have to do that anymore, starting with Super Peril. So we've moved on to the new version of it. And yeah, I recommend it too. I don't go into the engine and deal with any of that stuff almost ever. And the back end stuff, I go on Neighborhood sometimes, like if we're doing that to like connect to the consoles and all of that, but I don't do anything else. And but I would recommend it too, because Barry is an enigma, no doubt about it, but he is self-taught through that engine. I mean, he learned everything through that engine.
Yeah, I mean, you can code with it, but it's all, you don't have to program at all. It's all, if you want, it's all drag and drop, visual. So
it's great as long as you're okay making 2D games, which is what we do. Yeah. Otherwise, you need to use another engine, but it's perfect for us. So yeah, that's what we use. And also the totally like no licensing nonsense or drama or anything like that, because it's not super widely used for commercial like games that anyone cares about. But
what's the biggest game? Was Spelunky was Game Maker's?
Yeah, Spelunky was on Game Maker. That would probably be the biggest. I don't know. I don't even know if there's a wiki for like the whole list of games that would be on that engine. It would be interesting. Probably half the stuff East Asia Soft publishes and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, anyway, I totally interrupted that.
No. My topic is not that rich. There's not much to do with it. That's why I was like, you want to talk about this?
No, but nonetheless, I think it's an interesting topic to say that I still read. I like to buy my books because, and I have no problem with people doing libraries, and so I think it's awesome. Micah's a much more fastidious reader these days than I will ever be again, probably, and she borrows a lot of books digitally from the library, which I think is totally cool. But I like. Yeah. I'll take a picture of it sometime, and I have in my loft, like I got custom made shelves like across an entire wall, and it's just all my books. And it's the first time I was able to unify all of my collections over time, because I had my children's books and my young adult books like Redwall and all that stuff, and my dad still, and then I had my college books, and then I had my mom's, and then I had all my adult books, so they're all combined and together now. But I it's very selective. Like I'll be especially I like reading in the pool, and we have a pool, and we're blessed to have a pool in the backyard, and I'll float around the pool for like 2 hours and just read. And otherwise I just don't almost read at all. So last summer I read the first 2 Game of Thrones books randomly, which are both long and not easy reads in the pool. And this year I read a few football history books, and I did some Cormac McCarthy reading because we were doing that on the show and all of that. And then it kind of just shut off. Although I randomly bought, because he was on Walter Isaacson, the biographer, was on Lex Friedman. And so I bought he was talking about that, and I want to get to that, but he was talking a lot about his Benjamin Franklin book, which I had never read, because I've read his Steve Jobs book. It predates. It's the one he did before Steve Jobs.
Right.
And I read it in like a week. It's like 600 or 700 pages. It's fucking awesome. He's just such a gifted writer, especially because he talked about this on Lex Friedman. He's obsessed with chronology. And I think that is the best way you write a biography. And so if you could just wrap your mind around that, and that's how I see things anyway, he really writes for you. So I read that, and then I bought Bad Blood, which is the book about Theranos. But which is like the company.
I've watched the series and the documentary. I think I've gotten my fill of Elizabeth Holmes.
Holmes.
But she's great. It's a great book, though.
Yeah,
great story.
I picked it up, and I was just like, after reading Walter Isaacson and how briskly he writes, and how I was like, I don't really want to read this. And I put it down, and I just haven't. So that was probably a month ago. So yeah, it's very weird.
She's in jail. Somebody who had those delusions of grandeur and all that power and all that money, and she was on top of the fucking world. And cut to X years later, and she's sitting in a cell. I mean, it's so fucking weird how people like that fall to me. It's bizarre. Here's something though you can't do with digital books, which I love.
Oh yeah!
Oh, the smell, you guys, of a book. There's nothing
Definitely.
like it.
Of a bookstore, I think.
Bookstore.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally agree. Cog, where are you on this? Are you a reader, and do you read fiction or nonfiction? I should say again, I actually read mostly nonfiction. Me going off and reading randomly the Game of Thrones books was weird, because that's not typically what I would do.
Before Cog, I'm sorry, but nonfiction though, the other thing is, even that, there's limits in documentaries. Like, well, that is not enough. People aren't going to see that. People will write fucking nonfiction about the history of forks. There's a book I'm about to read from a British, she's like 26. She's a big social media British historian, Alice somebody. And her entire book, which is supposed to be excellent, is all it's about are the window covering art back in England in the late 1790 or the 1790s, early 1800s, and how that was their political cartoons, and how that was sort of all the people, every time a new cartoon went up, would gather around these windows. And the entire like 400-page book is about that. I mean, that's the coolest thing too, is that it's like, you can write, I'm going to make a movie about that. No, you're not. Not with my fucking money, you aren't. I mean, it's amazing. Anyway, sorry, Cock.
You good. This is a funny subject, because if our mom Cog is listening, she ever listened to this, she laughed, because I hate reading. Like, I've always hated it. But what's funny is, thanks to her, because at a young age, I grew up in the South Bronx, and I don't know if this applies to you. Colin, you would know from in Dagan, from a New York perspective. When you grow up in New York City, you're kind of established to go to your zone school. Right. So I'm growing up in the South Bronx, and the schools around me really, Paul elementary schools were really not good. So I was supposed to be assigned to a zone school, PS 29, and it just didn't have a good reputation. So basically what she did, because she taught me to read before I got to elementary, and she would take me to I was very young. I vaguely remember she would take me to, I guess, the deans or whoever, the principals, and say, look, my child is above the reading level of this school. He needs to go here. And I ended up going to a specialized primary school, SPS, because that's where I actually met Saul Brian, because his mom did the same thing. And we kind of got a better jump start ahead of other kids in my neighborhood, right? So I always got to thank Mama Cop for that, because even though I hate reading, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I'm at. Now, this is where the story continues. Now, taught me how to read and all that stuff, but reading was, as a person who active and just to sit stationary and read something, it was just boring out my mind. So she would have to trick me. So what would happen is, all right, first we're going to get you the library card. You're going to go to the public library, you got your card. And how she got me, there was these books called Choose Your Own Adventure.
Fuck yeah. I used to write my own.
Oh my God.
I love them.
So it's like, do this and then turn to page 9. Or if you do this, it's a game. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Choose Your Own Adventure. So I would just buy all these books. That evolved into as I got older, these books called Grail Quest. And they were very D&D kind of way. You had to get the pen and paper. Okay, you're going to start off, you're going to roll the dice. These are your hit points. You know what I mean? And you got to be honest with the battles that you did. And then if you lost, but you know if it said turn to page 13, that was the death page, you know, kind of thing. So that was what built up my stamina towards it. And then I finally got over my hate when it came to probably autobiographies of people who I really cared about or took interest in. So like for me, you know, I wanted to know about Malcolm X. Why do I not hearing a lot about him when I'm in school? I know this name, you know, hearing about the Black Muslim movement and why it was so important, and through the eyes of Alex Haley, what was documented. So that was that, you know, books like Art of War, 48 Laws of Power, certain things that, or people who I cared about. Like, for example, another one was recently, there's a rapper, his name is Prodigy of Mobb Deep. I was a big Mobb Deep fan. And as a person who grew up in the South Bronx, if anyone knows the history, Bronx and Queens have a very contentious hip hop relationship. You know what I'm saying? Between KRS-One, Boogie Down Production, denouncing Queens, and Bronx is the home of hip hop. And I'm a South Bronxian, so to speak. So like, I have a pride, like this is where it started at. And I'm not Queens guys. You're supposed to be the enemy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't originate it. We did. And then to come to find out, a lot of that is fabricated. It really wasn't no beef when KRS made this song called The Bridge Is Over in the South Bronx. He was just trying to get pride and trying to get on to get attention. But he really didn't truly hate Queens. And this other MC named MC Shan, he took the brunt of that. This man was abused in hip hop circles by how scathing the diss records that KRS-One and The Bridge Is Over did to them. So just learning these stories, and that's how I really trying to appreciate it, got my love of it. So it's one of those things now where it's like, if it's autobiography, I'm very techie, so definitely something. The AI right now is interesting me a lot. You know what I'm saying? And I've been bothering Maddie and Colin a little bit with my AI takes. I know how they feel about creativity and ethics. But yeah, I've just been reading that kind of stuff lately. So it's got to be very specific things to get me in the thing. And then I guess my choice is, y'all gonna kill me for this, but it's the bathroom, man, on the throne. I got like a little thing that I built in the bathroom where I have a case of all the books, and I get stuff done sometimes. I'll be knocking it out, man. You get some
mileage,
bro. Sometimes when you take a book in there and you don't have your phone, you're like, oh my God, this is awesome.
How much stuff you get done? Yeah, absolutely.
Totally, dude. I used to subscribe to the Hockey News just to have, then just put it in the bathroom.
Fucking phone. Ever. Because you know where it's been, and you're a fucking filthy piece of shit.
I'm not so skeeved out by that, dude. Like the whole idea of not bringing a drink into the bathroom. I'm like, really? Are you that much of a baby?
Really?
Are you
Dude,
a fucking baby?
It's not a baby. It's fecal particles fall into your drink.
There's no fecal particles.
Yes, there are.
And if that's happening, they're also gleaming onto your entire body.
Absolutely. When you smell somebody's fart, you're having a little bit of their shit in your mouth. That's true. Look it up. It's true. And while we're on the subject, I'm worried about myself, fellas. Speaking of pooping. Well, listen now. I'm on this Ozempic right now, right?
Yeah.
And it's going great.
Good.
But it does affect your, how often you poop. And today I pooped. And I have like Oprah had an episode that says, if your poop comes out like in an S, you're awesome. That means everything's great. I pooped today a piece of shit that literally was straight. There was no curve in it, and it was long. It looked like something a fucking bow and arrow could fire. And I'm just kind of like going,
that's like robot
shit. That's a robot poop, because usually your intestines are twisty and turny, which is going to give your poop some shape. I'm like, this went from my mouth straight down to my butthole. I don't know what's going on.
It didn't have time.
It didn't have time to get out there, boys, run. But I've never seen such thing. But you're right, Cog. In there, you can get a lot of reading done.
So much.
Let me say this real quick, Cog, because this actually ties into something that Jaffe said earlier about role-playing games that I also wanted to bring up, which is I never heard of this Grail Quest.
Oh, you got to get it, bro.
And it's so funny because you guys are the first people. It's happened now twice where I have to say something about it. You're the first people I ever knew. And I guess I never looked into this too deeply, where as a kid being into D&D and dice rolling and having all your different dice and all the rest, but I wanted to kind of play by myself, and I thought it wasn't possible. Like I didn't even know that was a thing. If I knew that this shit existed when I was a kid, I would have been all over this Grail Quest game, because I'm reading about it now. I'm like, I didn't know this existed. I had no idea this existed at all.
I didn't know either.
Excellent.
Totally
Shout out to my third grade friend, Marco Bernicia. He's the one that put me on. I was like, what are you reading? Why do you got a piece of paper? And he's not talking to anybody. You can tell he's having a grand old time. This man's hours upon hours just completely self-absorbed away from the other kids. And he's like, bro, Grail Quest, you got to get onto it. And they're so well done. I think it's a series of 6 books, and again, choice and con. It's the evolution of choose your own adventure with D&D characteristics and sensibilities, and it's really good. Colin, you would have loved it.
Oh, no, totally, dude. I just didn't even know that. And it's so funny. And I remember Jaffe saying earlier in the role-playing game conversation that he discovered at some time that you didn't really need, because you didn't have people to play with, that there were kind of ways to play that way. And I didn't even know that there were traditional ways to play by yourself.
I'm actually looking at board games right now while we're talking about it, because there are single player RPGs now that are like really beautifully made board games with all the pieces and all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
That has gone beyond just the books. But I mean, it's a whole genre now. That's really, I've never played one either. That's like a single player board RPG, but they're really expensive. They're like one of these $125 games with these massive pieces, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's neat. Like because it's kind of sad in a sense, because can we commune and do anything anymore together? Like, we can't even play board games together now. But at the same time, you don't always have
multiplayer games, though.
No, exactly. No, I was saying I'm making fun of my being self-deprecating, basically, where it's like we even have to remove the social aspect of the board game from it. But at the same time, not all of us had options of people to play with. Like when my friend Eric growing up wasn't around, we couldn't play D&D because he was the dungeon master. We didn't even know how to do it. We didn't have the books. I was so dude. I remember going to the hobby store to get my first D&D books, and how fucking excited I was. What I got was the thing called First Quest, which people might remember. It came out in the early 90s, which was like a box, and it had a bunch of documents in it, all your kind of first stuff, your first dice, or all of that, and everything to get started. And then I bought the player's handbook for AD&D 2. And I think they're on to like 7. I was saying this in another show, like 7 or something. I'm like, I don't even know, dude. They got rid of THACO apparently, and all this different. I'm like, I don't even know how to play anymore.
Well, they're doing it. They're really making a push to digital now and trying to do like they're slowly rolling out updates to, I forget what they call it, D&D Now or something like that. And I it's really neat where they want to go, which is basically we could be sitting here right now and playing D&D online is not some new thing, but playing it online with their kind of 3D engine. They're building it in Unreal 5. In fact, you should Google it real quick and just see what it looks like. It's beautiful. And, and is that Demio or Demio behind you, Con?
Oh, yeah, that's my baby. Demio player? Oh, we got to get it on.
I've never played it. Everybody tells me I should play it. It's VR D&D, right? Like a table.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so there's some amazing stuff coming in that space, but I love how it's exploded, though. The fact that, it's really kind of normal now and people recognize it and go, it's really creative as shit, man. I mean, you're making up your own fucking stories with your friends. It's cool.
It's super cool. I can we all agree? Or I guess I don't, because I actually don't have, I don't know if this is actually played out, but certainly Stranger Things must have fueled a revival.
Sure.
Oh,
that's
definitely.
And they cool. Even in that had Dungeon. There was a board game called Dungeon, which was kind of the gateway into D&D. So it was before you were worrying about stats and all that. It was just kind of, looting a dungeon in a traditional board game. And I remember the kids in Stranger Things were playing that as well. But I think that brought it to a lot of people. And then there's all these celebrities that play it now, and Critical Role is this big fucking thing. And
it's crazy that I think about this every once in a while. It's like the Rogan stuff where I was like, it was weird that I did Rogan. That's like a really big show. I have no idea how that happened. I was on Critical Role once, but it was before it was even very big at all. They did it at our house in San Francisco, or our apartment. And I think back about that. I'm like, oh, that's so strange. Like, that's a fucking massive show. I remember when I lived in LA, there were billboards on the highway for it. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. That's bizarre.
Yeah. Very, very strange. But
wait, so you were on it and did you play then?
Yeah, so we had I had like a player, like I don't remember very much of it. It was almost 10 years ago now, but it was like what would you call it? Like a guest character or something like that. And so we sat in with them, as I recall. And yeah, it was like something like that. Because we were friends with, and I still consider myself like, she's always been nice to me. Ashley Johnson and all those people, they've always been good to me. And I think Matt Mercer's in there and a few others. So the voice actor cadre, they seem to do a lot less these days, which is good because it was becoming a little much. Like how much Nolan North obviously he was everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. All right. So where are we on this topic here? Of books. Did we get to you yet, Dake?
No, I could weigh in.
Yeah, please do.
I mean, you know what I was just thinking? It wasn't even 20 years ago, right? As the big Borders and Barnes and Nobles were closing their doors, it was like, are books done? Like looking around, like, is it going to be all e-reader? Like there was a time where it was like, I don't know if this is finished.
Well, isn't that interesting that it's the only thing that survived really? Nothing else survived the way it was.
No,
the books did. Like there was a moment
vinyl came
where it
back,
hit.
but
CDs
it's niche
pretty much
though.
Yeah.
Yes, true.
But I think it's because reading physical is part of the experience. Definitely. A lot of people who are aficionados of music will say, "Oh, well, vinyl is too." It's like, yeah, but once the music's going, the music's going. Yes, the quality might be different, but you're still walking around your kitchen cooking something while you're listening to your record. But the tangibility is part of the experience. I think
absolutely
is why maybe it's stuck around.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. And also just to own them and have them on a shelf and have a tactile, something that you really like and just sort of the appeal and I don't know, maybe the bragging rights of your bookshelf. Like, look at it's a way to display your taste, and your
I didn't know that was part of it. I got to buy some of this shit.
But you know what,
Jaffe, do you have? What's back there?
That's probably almost all video game and animation related books. Yeah, I would say. Yeah. And some graphic novels and stuff. Okay. A smattering. But you reminded me of the kids because, I mean, I have reading now and reading when I was a kid. When I was a kid, once I graduated from like picture books, like illustrated books, Shel Silverstein and the like, which I still love, by the way. Once I grudgingly gave that, that kind of reading up, so second grade on up, I had a very hot and cold sort of hit or miss relationship with books because I felt like there was such a steep inconsistency once I got into chapter book territory. It was probably, in all fairness, like once I graduated from like Encyclopedia Brown. It was like, all right, I don't know. My parents tried to encourage me to read, which was pretty fashion forward for boomer parents. And they would give me the odd book like The Hobbit, which I loved. They were very insistent that I read Richard Adams' Watership Down, which I went on to have a love affair with. But then there were so many books in between those ones that hit with me that were like, oh, this is shit. I don't like this. What is this? And then the stuff we were reading in school.
Oh my God. They fuck kids up with this
especially in junior high. It's like, how much Arthur Miller and Jack London are we going to read? Like, it was just like, what the fuck?
It is almost to the point of being child abuse. I'm not making a joke. They turn kids off from reading.
It's
because
awful.
They say, "Oh, you need to read this classic." And my kids read Catcher in the Rye. I'm like, this is stupid. It's kind of like it may you can show somebody Citizen Kane in film school and go, "This is why it was important." But if you show most people Citizen Kane who aren't in film school, they're like, "That's fucking boring." And so I think the same thing. These kids need to be able to read some shit that's good and relevant and modern, or they're going to hate it.
You have to evolve those lists. My kids are, I mean, it's a weird comparison because I don't know if Colin gets angry at me for saying this, but we went to a below average school district on Long Island.
I mean, that's clear. You don't have to say it. That's clear.
I wouldn't even put it as average.
It was horrible.
My kids go to a very good public school system, like one of the best in the state, and they're still reading the same shit. So there's no real,
What are they reading?
It's all like my daughter's in 11th grade AP English, and she's still reading Arthur Miller. It's
like Death of a Salesman and all that stuff? Oh,
Crucible, Scarlet Letter. It's all the same shit. She hasn't graduated up to the stuff that I was reading. Colin and I were very fortunate because we had him a decade later than me, but we had a very good English teacher that taught us, that kind of took us both under her wing. And I remember where reading started with me. It was in 11th grade AP English, where I was just like, I don't know. My relationship with reading was such that I don't want to waste my time. There's not that much good stuff out there. and she had us read William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury.
Mhm.
And I was just like, oh, like what? Like it just took a certain echelon of writing. And maybe that was maybe that was the writer in me, the then untapped writer in me. I was responding to something, but that's when I was like, oh shit, writing can be this. The weird thing about that book is, from a relationship point of view or relevance, I mean, this is about like an aristocratic, once well-to-do Southern family that's disintegrating. It had nothing to do with my Long Island upbringing or whatever.
Right.
It was a little old-fashioned, in fact, but something in it with the character building and the writing and just the quality of the prose, I was just like, holy shit. It opened up a whole new world to me of what writing could be.
Yeah.
And gave me it gave me something to weigh reading with. It gave me a barometer. And that's what ushered in a love of reading for me. And I love reading now. And it's still the same thing with my kids. They do very well in school, but they don't pick up a book on their leisure time. That's not what they do.
Well,
with
in
their
some
free
sense,
time.
though, this is what I've said this before, though, Dig, because we talk a lot about language and all these different things. And I was noting,
Sure.
like, shouldn't we be more literate than ever? And yet we're not. We have massive illiteracy problem in the United States compared to how much money we make. And a lot of it, again, I've said a million times, goes back to this weird way in which they were teaching kids how to read for like 20 years and it all backfired on them. And there's all sorts of fascinating stuff about that. But it's interesting that I was going to say with Miss Parry, who is the teacher you're bringing up, I had her for 3 years. I had her for honors and then AP Lit and all the rest. And I guess AP English she introduced me to many of, if not most of my still to this day, favorite prose books.
Like what? I'm curious.
Like Catch-22, Fahrenheit 451, Sirens of Titan, like just random, Kerouac, and just like which is a little less of what I'm talking about, but just interesting things that I still, Animal Farm, 1984, like these are
Orwell, a lot of Orwell.
Yeah, like Orwell for sure. And Animal Farm especially, I fucking love Animal Farm because it is so easy to read and it is so powerful. It is like, if you don't understand what the fuck this book is saying to you, I don't even know, like, hit yourself over the head with it a little bit. It's so and to this day, I would say, I'd have to really sit and think about it. Probably 7 of my 10 or 8 of my 10 favorite books were literally introduced to me by those classes. And so I've said this to you before, Dagan, I know someone, an old friend of mine, actually my very first girlfriend in high school that I dated for like 2 months or whatever. We went to Northeastern together and we're still friends today, but she is friendly still with a few of the teachers back there. And I can definitely find Miss Parry. And
we should have Miss Parry on. I would.
Yes, I was going to say we should have her on one day.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was like that West Wing episode when Donna brings the teacher to Bartlett and he calls her and talks about King Lear. Oh my! I'm crying the whole fucking time.
Oh my goodness, love it. I love your love of West Wing because you and I share that.
We should do a West Wing podcast.
That would be fun, dude. That would be. Again, you and I have said before, like you can't even really do a show like that anymore because it would be looked at as fantasy.
Yeah.
But at the time and after, dude, West Wing's so good. If you're a political junkie, you got to watch the West Wing.
Yeah, it's excellent. Excellent show.
Jaffe, do you want, I mean, here's what I'm trying to look for with my kids right now to kind of hook them into reading. It's kind of ironic because like with my oldest, we read all of Harry Potter together before she went to bed. We started when she was 4 and we finished when she was 11. We chipped away at all the books. Oh. And so my kids were brought up with reading every single night.
Yeah, mine too.
Much like your kids. Same thing. And it just didn't catch on. So I'm looking for their Sound and the Fury where, you know what it is? This is the way I look at it. I try to be very diplomatic with my kids with reading because I'm a great lover of media too. I love games. I love TV. I love movies. There's something very cool about all the things, right? Like witnessing a creator's vision on screen, seeing a director's style, enjoying an actor's version or portrayal of a character, great cinematography, color, all that kind of stuff. But the thing about books I try to instill in my kids is that they're, like you said earlier, Jaffe, when you're kicking off the conversation, it's like, that's the one medium that really fully harnesses your imagination because it's not telling you, it's not giving you what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it tastes like, what it feels like. It's leaving that
up to you. And you don't even realize you're doing the creation. Right.
So true.
It's all up to you. It's one of the oldest art forms and it's still, that's the power of it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Doesn't have these other things.
What I hear you saying though reminds me of like there's something my response is guided by this idea of watching my own kids and going, like when you bring up 1984 and you say what this book is really about, right? I mean, our generation came up, and kids today can still do that, of course, but that sort of sense of it's this, but it's really this, right? I mean, I look at my kids watch lots of political YouTube. They'll watch like Second Thought, which is kind of super far left socialist stuff, which is really interesting, really well done. And they'll watch everything along the spectrum. I think kids today are maybe used to just getting the dessert first, or the meal. It's like they're not, it's like I don't need Animal Farm to tell me about conformity. I don't need Fahrenheit to tell me about, censorship. I can just watch these 4 or 5 people on YouTube. And it doesn't mean it's a better way to send the message, but I just think that maybe they're used to that. And that's how they get the same sound in the fury. But, so I guess my point is, I don't know if reading itself is so important as long as they're somehow getting the nutrition of that from something.
Right. Well, that's a great point, Jaffe, in the sense that it's like almost too cute by half. Like to understand what Animal Farm is saying, which is important, you need to read and understand it, as opposed to just ingesting someone that's being a little more literal about it. Which is maybe
to
more
be
useful.
Perfectly fair, we had the bandwidth in school to read and digest. We weren't worried about, hiding under desks from shooters and terrorists. And I mean, that generation is so traumatized by so much that has happened in the last 15 years, that 20 years, I'm fascinated by what they become as an adult generation. And because even now you see the fact that they're willing to concede a lot of freedoms that to a lot of us are incredibly, sacred, but to them, they're just like, that's easy to say when you're a kid of the 80s and 90s and things were kind of okay. But when you're growing up with the shit we're growing up with, maybe we need somebody to come in and lead this shit. Cause do you think the boomers experienced something similar in the 50s, like in the early Cold War with duck and cover and all of that?
Duck and cover.
Because isn't it explained that in the beginning they were earnest about it, and then it became like as the 50s went on, everyone's like, this is fucking bullshit. But it's not similar, because it would only be similar if every now and then or often an atomic bomb went off. Actually went off. Yeah, that's fair. But I wasn't trying to be comparable and saying one is worse or better than the other.
No, I'm not either. But I'm saying the psychological response is probably very different, because after a while you're like, this duck and cover is stupid. A, it's not going to happen, and B, it's a wooden desk. It's not going to protect me from a bomb.
Because our mother was born in 1950, and she explains it like that she remembers it kind of being an earnest thing. And then people realized, because she would say, eventually they started saying, put your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye.
Right.
And and then people stopped kind of taking it seriously, and you almost became fatalistic about it, where it's like, if it I think where her parents might have even said, like, listen, if it happens, you're going to be, if they drop a bomb in New York City, we're not that far away. It's like, it's going to be a problem, and that's not going to stop it.
Right.
And that's interesting to think about.
I think it's more appropriate or accurate to say, if you look at the people who were around during the Depression, I think their trauma stayed with them in a meaningful way that you could just see in terms of how they dealt with money and how they dealt with food and all the sense of a sense of scarcity. I think that's the kind of thing we'll see with this generation because of all that they have. I mean, it breaks my heart, really. It's very emotional to me when I really think about what they have lost. It doesn't mean they're going to have bad lives or anything, but you just think about being a teenager and you can't go outside and you can't be with your friends for 18 months. And you think about I can't fathom going to school. Now, I used to drive. I'm so grateful my kids, not that they're safe because of it, but I used to drop them off and just go, God, I could never see them again because some jackass could walk in with a fucking gun.
Yeah, it's scary.
And imagine being there every day and having that somewhere in your fucking mind. Now, a lot of people who grew up in areas that aren't very safe would say, yeah, welcome to my fucking world, jackass. I get it. But it's kind of everywhere now, and it is
dark. I was in ninth grade when Columbine happened. And I remember even at the time, we didn't go to a good school at all. Cops and security guards and getting,
probably better off there than in Columbine, though.
Getting
in terms of night school.
After 9/11, it was even worse. I was a senior when 9/11 happened, but there was I remember Columbine, like no one took it seriously even then, at least in my experience. It was an inconvenience to all of us. We were like, are you fucking kidding me? Now we have to do this. Now we have to do this. Now there are bomb threats, but we take them seriously. And now we're outside. I remember one week in high school, there was a bomb threat every morning. And so like it basically just wiped the entire week out because they would just kept us outside. And it's like, but it was post Columbine. But I never, I guess, internalized it as a kid where it's like, oh, that could actually be you. And now it does seem a little bit more like that, where like I would go to school today and just look around and be like, yeah, I guess reasonably this could be me, I guess. And that's fucked, so. All right. Did we go around the horn on this topic? Are we good here? Satisfied?
I think we did.
All right, Dave, let's finish strong then with you and your topic, and we'll end this holiday episode of I was going to say sacred symbols, but that's not what it is. It's Constellation.
Close enough.
Is this Lex Freeman? Where's he?
Where's
Lex?
Oh my God. Can we get Lex on the pod?
Yeah, right.
My wife doesn't understand. Like every time she walks in and I'm listening to a Lex show, she's like, who is this monotone guy? And I'm like, you don't understand. You don't get it. This guy's like, you know what the thing is with Lex? It's his humility, but it's also his curiosity.
Yeah, he's very curious and very smart, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He also sounds like, what's his name? The actor. I'll think of it. He's one of the stoner actors in that group with like
Woody Harrelson?
No. I'll figure it out. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Go on. Yeah. So, all right. So my topic, I was just looking at my email. I don't know. I don't usually send such lengthy emails, so I'll paraphrase. But anyway, the conceit that I posed to you guys is, what would you like to try that you haven't tried yet? And this is kind of really in the spirit of life is short, right? Possibly, definitely brought on by my entrance into my golden years over here now that I'm 50. It's visions of sand through the hourglass, the clock, the hands of the clock rapidly spinning around the, visions of time-lapse photography of the clock hands spinning. Listen, time waits for no man, right? The minutes are flying out the window. So is there a thing or things that you guys would like to try that you've been putting off? A hobby, an activity, a sport, some sort of cuisine that you want to taste or try to cook, an art or a craft, whatever, however you want to take it. Part of this is, honestly, I just wanted to have a chance to talk about surfing. That's the first thing. Second of all, I have two things. One's surfing and one's playing the guitar, but they're both very similar for me in that I have no idea how to do either one up to this point. They're both things that I've long wanted to try, but for me, it's an energy of, I think I'm starting to realize, or I probably have realized this for a long time, but it's coming to a head, is that my life is a lot of all work and no play. And also I realize that I need some balance. I just need some zen. And for that, I think a big part of that for me is just trying to sidestep my usual orbit, right? Drawing, illustration, animation, my career, even podcasting, and just kind of a one for me, one for them mentality. Like, what do I do for me that's kind of a low pressure thing? I don't have high expectations to be great. That would just take me out of the pocket, just take me out of my usual world and let me concentrate on something else, just put my head in a different space. Surfing, I used to think with surfing, I've been having surfing fantasies for a long time. Like, we're going to move to the water, whether that's up here or down south, and I'm going to become this surfer dude. And it used to be a thing, okay, you're just an aging skateboarder and you're trying to parlay the board sport thing. Hold on. Right? You're trying to take the board sport thing and just do the old man board sport thing. So, which does make sense. A little bit of adrenaline junkie, but much less of the risk. No, you don't have to fall on the pavement anymore, right? But I don't think it is that. I'm looking for something that I could slip into another subculture, like skateboarding, where I can make something.
Have you tried drugs?
That's plan B.
Oh, good.
That's plan B. Don't worry. We're right near Kensington. I can get all the.
Oh yeah, you get all you want.
No, I'm done.
Like a zombie.
But I realized, like, that's, I spent however many 2 decades being immersed in the skateboarding subculture. You live it, you breathe it, you walk it, you talk it, you dress like it. It's your whole universe. And I think that's why so many skateboarders graduate to surfing, because it's the same thing. You're just adopting a new thing that you could immerse yourself in that's like skateboarding. It's just kind of, I hate to say it this way, because it's a very dangerous sport. You're dealing with reefs and giant waves and undertow and all that kind of stuff. So it is different on a different front, but there's something, it's lower impact. You don't have to worry about falling and breaking your leg or breaking your neck or breaking your arm on the asphalt. So I realized that's a big thing of surfing with me, that I could be the old surfer dude, with the sawhorses in my garage with the surfboard, I'm waxing it up. I got the old Jeep. Like it's a whole image. Like I have this whole picture in my mind of how I'm gonna, enter into my sunset years with surfing.
How long has this been a thing?
Oh my God. Since my mid-30s, when you start realizing it really hurts when you fall skateboarding.
Yeah.
You're skateboarding much, much less frequently.
Can I psychoanalyze you for free?
Here you go.
Have at it, dude.
Well, let's put it this way. If it's been a desire for that long, you don't really want to do it for the most part. We do what we want to do. That's just like Colin was saying earlier, when you come to the conclusion that failure is just part of it. There's also kind of a cousin to that rule that I think when you look around at your life, that's the life you want. It doesn't mean you're happy with it, but that's the life that represents what you're willing to do up until now. And so 15 years is a long time to have this fantasy, right? But the more important thing I will say, though, about it is there's a woman named Martha Beck, who's kind of one of these woo-woo life coaches, but she's got some good ideas. And she has this thing called, people will come to her and say, oh, I want to be famous, or I want to be an actor, I want to be, whatever, a writer, I want to be a football player. And she's like, okay, all that's great, but what's the feeling state behind it, right? It's like, what are you actually trying to get? Because you can probably get that almost immediately or within a couple of hours. It's like the feeling of the guy living by the water with the surfboard, because I would say if you really just want the athletic experience of it, you would have done it by now, or maybe you just don't have the time. It may just be literal. You don't have the time, but short of that, the question is, like, I used to want to be a movie director so badly, but I didn't really want to be a movie director. I didn't want to do the job of movie director, which I found incredibly boring. I wanted the lifestyle, but then when you go deeper, what is the lifestyle going to give you? Oh, it was going to give me, I wouldn't be worried about money anymore. I would have, people around me all the time, so I'd never be lonely. I would have people thinking I was successful, and that would make me feel like I had done, and then you kind of go, oh, okay, that's what this is really about. So that's all I would say to that. It sounds, there's like a lot of interesting threads to pull on that one, but surfing's also fun from what I hear.
Yeah. One thing, my one excuse for that would be that we're landlocked. I'm in Philly. I'm an hour and a half from the ocean. I'm not far.
Right.
But we don't live there yet.
It's too bad you didn't pick it up when we grew up on the beach.
Whoa, shots.
I did try, because not all, but some of my skateboarding friends came out of surfing. Right. There was one guy I grew up with, Mike, who was a big surfer, and I did try shortboard surfing for a while and found it really difficult. Not for a while. I probably gave it a fighting chance for like the better part of 2 weeks. And I was like, this is really difficult, but I think the physical activity component of my life is definitely missing. So I could plug into that. The adrenaline thing of putting yourself at risk and then sort of seizing victory over that. Like, oh, that was dangerous, but I made it type of thing. I definitely miss that. But
has that been tabled a bit because when your kids arrived, you were like, I'm going to put that a little bit on the back burner?
It wasn't even that, Jeff. It was just being old. By the time, I was a first-time dad at 33, and then my second was born when I was 37. So by the time I was 35, I do remember my friend and I were campaigning. He lived in Trenton at the time. I lived here. And we would meet up and go to a skate park that was in like a neutral location. Once a week, we would get coffee and a bagel and then go skate. We were both middle 30s. And I remember at that time feeling like once a week, this is even pushing it. And that was like really pared down, like not really doing a lot of tricks, like a lot of cruising, like, you know, some things, but just pared down. I wasn't skating the concrete pool. I would just be on the street course. You know, it was definitely like I was sunsetting it. And it really wasn't about putting myself at risk with
They
kids.
would not let you back into Dogtown at that point, is what you're saying.
Love it.
Yeah, and avoiding the kid, like definitely going when the high school kids would be in school, like trying to avoid the 18-year-olds. Like we didn't need that kind of pressure. We also didn't need to be made fun of, that whole thing. Guitar is the same thing though. Like something, I always say this to Colin, like I was born with no musical talent. It was always the most foreign thing to me, like the piano. It's like, what is that thing? And how do I make it work? So there's something very low rent or low obligation about just trying something new, because I don't have high expectations for it. Just think it will be fun. I don't want to write music. I just want to play a little bit of Hendrix. I'm not going to be,
yeah, you know, I can't play music. I have no talent. I just want to play some Hendrix.
Licks.
Yeah, just play. Yeah, that's
couple of licks.
So,
I'm not going to be Jimmy Page, but let me learn a couple of chords from Stairway to Heaven. You know what I mean? Like something.
Yeah, guitars. I suck at it, but it's so chill. Just to sit there and pick at it is a very relaxing thing. You said Zen. It feels very much like it helps you get away from your brain.
Oh, there we go.
Coming live now is a local legend who made it big, Colin Moriarty. His big hit is
I'm
called...
not a good guitar player at all. It's funny. This came up on Sacred Symbols recently because I was making fun of Chris about something. So the guitar was there, but you can easily learn how to play guitar. I taught myself how to play. I'm not very good. But you just can go read tab. You don't need to even read music if you don't want to. And just
everybody tells me about that.
Read tablature. It's easy as hell to read.
Right.
You know, and then you can translate it through that.
No. What are you doing? Don't fucking pick it up and then don't play anything.
All right, let's see.
It's a fucking cock tease. Jesus Christ.
Let's see. Well, yeah, this is not in tune at all. So
Dagan,
you guys go on to the next one.
That seems maybe more promising. If Colin can't even play that thing, I don't stand a chance.
Yeah, I don't think it's in tune, so I'd have to tune it.
Well, Kyle, let me kick it over to you. I mean, what have you been wanting to have a crack at that you haven't really endeavored to start yet?
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote a few things down here. I'm just putting the guitar down. I want it to fall. Start your 7-day free trial for unlimited access to guitar tuning. No, I'll just use it for free. Thank you. Yeah, so for me, I wrote down a few things here. One is kind of more realistic, I think. Well, they're both realistic, but one is like a real life thing and one is just kind of a want. So back here, drums. I grew up playing drums and that was my primary instrument. I learned bass in college out of necessity because we couldn't really play drums anymore in an urban environment and in like a dorm environment. And then I just stopped playing and I wanted to get back to it. And it's to Jaffe's point of, it's like, I thought about it for so long and then I actually had an opportunity to do it. Like I have a house, I live in suburbia now, it doesn't matter anymore. And so I made it happen. I was like, I know I need to reconnect with this. I don't really know anything about new drum kits and all of the rest. And I was so glad I did that because I was talking to Ramon about this. It's strange. Like I played drums from 5th grade through college and college in the summer and then not really at all after that. Except for you go to a person's house and see a drum kit and always sit behind it and stuff like that, but you're rusty or whatever. And I was telling Ramon, like just 2 years, or not even 2 years, like a year into having a kid again, I'm like, I'm better at drums than I was ever. And I was good when I was a kid. I was like, it's like this latent thing. And I rediscovered it with that in mind. I'd like to continue going. And I was saying to Micah, my wife, that there's like, that's kind of like two things. It's like a fork in the road kind of thing. It's like, okay, that's one path. And I'm glad I took that. The other one is hockey. And I love hockey, as everyone knows, but I grew up playing it. That was my sport. And
just stay away from being goalie. You'll be fine.
I was a goalie.
I know you were.
Okay.
Colin, I want you checked out first thing Monday. Okay, we just talked about hockey and goalie.
Right. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was also looking at my phone because someone was just calling me. I've been saying this, but I have my watch now connected to my phone, and it's like constantly annoying the shit out of me.
Small watch in the notification.
I really got to do something about it. But so when I was in Santa Monica, and you might remember this, Jaffe, from being out there, they play hockey on the beach, and it's really awesome. They tip over. There's like a whole Facebook group and a whole community.
Hockey on the beach, like
In the parking lot. Yeah.
In the parking lot. Okay. All right. I got it now.
On the on the waterfront. Yeah. There's like a whole tradition going back 40 years apparently there, and there's like major Facebook group and people get together and it's like explicitly no goalies, and it's really fascinating. And I was walking by one of their games one day. They're just pick up, because there's if people have never been to Santa Monica, there's just a shit ton of parking lots, and they're really mostly never all full. So, and it's like nicely paved, and people just meet up after work or whatever and play. And I walk by them one day, and I'm like, "Do you guys just play pickup or whatever?" He's like, "Oh no, like what's your name? I'll invite you to the Facebook group." And we basically what happens is people like put up these posts and are saying like, "Let's meet here at this time," and then people respond to it and say if they have a full game and like and they delineate their teams and stuff. It's really cool. And they used to do this, I guess, by text message, and used to be like a phone tree before that and all that back in the day. And so that got me to your point about like rejuvenating myself to being like, I can make this happen. So I looked up stuff in LA where I can go, like there's this massive hockey mega store there. I went there, I got like really nice new skates and gloves and a hockey stick, and started skating around down at the beach and playing a little bit, and it was cool. And like getting back into that now, I want to take that to the next level where I love roller hockey. I think roller hockey's dope. That's what that was, obviously. But I love ice hockey. I mean, that's like what I grew up actually playing on the ice, and I played from when I was a very little kid through high school. And I'd like to get into men's league hockey at some point. And what's so funny, and I've told this story before, is that I played men's league hockey as a kid because my coach, Pete, in high school would play men's league, and they never had goalies. And so he's like, "Will you come and like play with us?" Basically asked Dad. I'd be like 16, and it would be beer hockey. Like they'd have beers on the bench, and they'd be dicking around. There'd be like a referee they hire, like one of their friends, and I would just have to keep my helmet on so no one knew. But eventually everyone kind of knew that I was just a kid, and it was fun, and I loved the vibe, and I always remembered that. It was like, this is kind of dope. It's like it's like 1 a.m. These guys are like escaping from their families or whatever for a little while, or like, they're working, they're just all playing hockey. Some of them are really good. Some of them are horrible. It doesn't really matter. It's not very serious. And then everyone goes home, and I want to kind of see if I can rediscover that. And this leads into the other thing I was going to say, which is, as longtime listeners know, like I have a major, it's not even a fear. I just don't want, I guess it is a fear. I don't want to drive. I don't drive. And there was a brief period in my life when I did. And then when I lived in San Francisco, I actually had a scooter, which is even more suicidal than driving, which is strange.
Those hills.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have gone, I'm going to be 40 in 2024. And it's kind of interesting. It's like, are you really going to go and just continue not to drive? And what's interesting is that although I know it puts people out once in a while, is that because of my urban living for so long after leaving the island, it just never really came up, and it still doesn't really come up because I don't really want to go anywhere. And that's kind of what I was talking to Micah about it. And she's like, you shouldn't even worry about it, because she knows me well enough to know where it's like, you don't want to go like, what do you even want to do anyway? It's like, and the answer is that I don't really want to do anything or go anywhere. I was saying to her, if I had a car, like this is what happened when I had a fucking scooter in San Francisco. I'd be like, oh, you know what? I want McDonald's. I'm going to go to, and I would just like go to McDonald's. And that's exactly what would happen now. I'd just be going, getting more fast food. I'd be going to Walmart and spending more money, or Target. I'm almost should be grateful in a backwards way how much money I've spent by never spending a fucking cent on a car, basically. And no insurance, no gas, obviously no maintenance, nothing. And I'm kind of in a situation now where I think we have a good division of labor in our relationship, where it's like, I'll take care of like the bills and all of that, and you kind of go and get the things we need and bring it back, or bring us to where we need to go. And I think she's okay with that. And I kind of felt, I was grateful for Micah, because when I was like, we were walking the dogs and I was talking to her about this, and she was really like, you don't even really need to worry about that. And I was like, okay, I guess I don't. But that's what came to mind for me. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. When I was married, oh my God, the best thing about being, well, there's a lot of good things, but the best thing was the fucking closet was always stocked in the hallway with like soap and toothpaste it was just like a magic fucking closet. It was like, and I know my wife was doing it. Oh, that was so nice. Just now you got to go get it yourself. But I'll say though that I'm like you. I can drive. I have a car. I've driven since I was 15. I Uber wherever I can. The grocery store brings me my groceries. If I don't have to go outside, I don't know, man. I like it. I like not going anywhere.
Me too. So, I really do.
I think parking. Do you have to street park, or do you have a garage?
Oh, I have parking. Yeah.
Parking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm totally
I just
with
never
you.
use it.
People cannot conceptualize. It's like, they would think that I guess our point of view is small-minded, but I think it's small-minded to not be able to conceptualize another view other than your own. And people are like, how can you possibly extract any joy of just living a very homebody-ish or a limited life in that way? And I'm like, I don't know. I've fantasized about living like this my entire life, where it's like, you don't have to go anywhere.
You're doing a job you love. Yeah. You have a wife you love, a house. Why do you want to go out and deal with bullshit?
Exactly right. It's like it's perfect in many different ways. So yeah, that's where I am on that. Is, one thing that I picked up randomly that I am glad I picked up too was just because I always like, man, I'm so weak and I'm so girlish up top or whatever. And so I was starting to lift weights. I was glad that I did that. I never, ever, 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 ever thought I would lift weights in my entire life. Ooh. Even when I was a big cardio guy, at Northeastern, we have the Marino Center, which is like a beautiful gym. It's like 4 stories. It's insane. And I never stepped a foot in that fucking place. Never. You see all the people on the windows on Huntington Avenue, like all working out and stuff. And I was like, I'm never going to that fucking place. But I think a lot of it was just having space in my house. Like, we have multiple extra rooms. So we just made one into a gym and a home gym. And with that, I was off to the races, and it feels good. Like, I'm not getting like swole or anything like that, but I see the difference in like my arms and the way I look. And I'm glad that I did that. I feel a lot better about myself now. And
and it's a routine.
Yeah.
There's something about routine also, like that. That's what I'm talking about. Just trying to get out of my usual space. It's like, I love drawing. I love animation. I love illustration. I love doing the podcasting. It's just, I feel like I'm always, it gets very one note, it's like, I just need something new, and leave the perfectionist, leave the OCD. You're not going to be, who's a great guitarist. I'm not going to be Prince. I'm not going to be George Harrison. I'm not going to be Clapton. Right. But let me take a crack. Jaffe, where do you want to go with this, my friend? I'm genuinely curious. I mean,
well, okay. So I thought about this because it was an interesting question, and every now and then I kick around the idea, and I don't mean like I'm getting older. Like, I think I don't have a problem getting older, but I kind of, I would take a walk in the park and stuff, and I'm like, I think it'd be fun to join like a softball team because I really like playing baseball. But and the older I get, the more I really do come to love sports and the strategy of it, and but I think there's, I'm not in a good enough shape right now. I wouldn't really enjoy it. And so maybe once I lose a little weight and get in shape, maybe I'll try it. But honestly, my first thought was, I'm very, very fortunate because, I'm doing, I have the privilege to do exactly what I want to do. And I the other day I realized, because both my kids are now full grown adults, and I realized, I have no desire to die today. I'd like to live to 100. But if I did, I'd be like, that was pretty good. Did pretty good, I did a lot of shit that I wanted to do, and I'm doing what I want to do right now, which is not some kind of noble statement. I can afford to do that. It's a privilege that most people don't have. So nothing came to mind at first. Like, I'm like, no, I'm doing exactly what I want to do anyway, but then I really thought about it, and I said, the only thing that I want to do, like, that fits in the category of like, life is short, don't not do this, is I would like to take a trip that would take me first to Lithuania, because that's where my dad's side of the family's from. And I don't know why, but I think as you get older, or as I've gotten older, I've had a desire to just see that place. And, the idea that these people who came before me, figured out a way to make it and be attractive enough to fuck somebody, and to be, I just, to see where that really started, and almost like feel that energy. I would do that. Then I would want to fly to Alabama and see my family and hang out for a while. And then I would want to rent a car, and I would do it with some friends, or I would do it with my kids or by myself. I don't know. But I would like to drive up to DC, because I'm a huge political junkie and I'm a huge history junkie. And I would like to just spend 2 weeks being a total whore at the museums and the White House and the Ford Theater, and just and not be rushed to get out of the museum. It's like, Dad, you're reading everything. I'm like, you goddamn right, I'm reading everything. Everything in here. And then I would time it so I would be able to keep going north and get into Salem around October 20th, so I could experience Halloween in Salem. And once I do that, that's my bucket list. I'm good. So that's my thing.
I love that.
Yeah, DC
it's
is
a
awesome.
thorough plan.
Yeah, it's very thorough.
Yeah, I remember doing that museum run, and because I used to do that road trip to DC a lot. But I remember when I finally did the museum run, it was the Holocaust Museum broke me, bro.
I did that in LA. It's amazing.
That
it's tragic.
Broke me. There's a part where you walk. There's a physical part where you walk through, and then you go through the chambers, and then they had like miniatures of how people were being herded in. And man, that got me out. It really hit like this atrocity happened. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that long ago, right? So
and there's a lot of them still happening today.
Oh, yeah.
There was maybe it's a different topic for another show, but there was a museum exhibit that we went to in San Diego or LA, and it was literally about being in a cafe that was bombed in maybe Beirut or what I think it was Beirut. And it was done by an artist, and all the exhibit was they had used like piano wire and all kinds of effects to rig a moment in time of being in the explosion. So you would walk through it and you would see bodies flying back and trays of food and Jello that was hanging from the ceiling, but it didn't look like it. It looked like it was you were in the middle of
Wow.
And yeah, man. I mean, people are experiencing that right now. We're just a horrible species. But I hear you. The Holocaust Museum is something.
Yeah, never been.
Yeah, you got to do it. You owe yourself. Powerful.
Yeah, I want to check that out. I always think of the Smithsonian and how cool it is. I don't think
I've
ever...
the Smithsonian. I've been there once.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
I wanted to go to the White House, but I was like, I'm not going if Trump's in office. I wait till the carpets are clean. But if Christie or Haley or even DeSantis or Biden gets in or Newsom gets in, I'll go. But I'm not going if he's in the fucking White House.
You're gonna go street fight.
You got to hurry up before Gene moves. Gene's fixing to move, right?
Yeah, I don't think he can. That
dude, I'm sorry. Let's take a breather for a minute. I'm on a podcast with Gene last night. He comes on the show, and he's eating edibles, but I don't know how high he is because I can't tell. This motherfucker, I don't know if he is like the video game version of that George Santos guy, and he just lies, or this guy has lived a fucking
I think
life of it. He's telling me last night, he's like, I was like 16 and I was fucking this 25-year-old woman, and then the husband showed up at the bus stop to confront me.
Told me that.
And then he's telling me, he says, "Did you ever see that movie Eyes Wide Shut?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "They do that in DC. You wear a mask." He says, "I've been to one of these parties," and he says, "But I have." And there's like in one room they're doing coke, in one room they're this, and there's orgies.
Didn't they say? Don't they say that Kubrick got that so right that they killed him over that?
I've heard that rumor.
Was the conspiracy for a while.
Not over the moon landing, but on that. Think about that.
He got that so because he was killed right after that movie came out.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I don't think it was even out.
Killed. He died. He died.
The claim
is that
Gene says, it was not out. That's right. Gene says he was wearing his glasses and he had to wear a mask. And after a while, he went up to the owner of the party or whoever was hosting it and said, "Can I take the mask off? Because I can't do this." And the owner's like, "Yeah, do whatever you want. It's hedonistic, here." And so he takes it off and he says, "Somebody recognizes me." And it's this woman who says, "Are you Gene Park from the Washington Post?"
No.
And he says, "It gets better. Cog, sit down, my friend. It gets better." That's nothing. So he says, "Yeah." And they talk for a minute. And then she says, I really like your energy and your writing and your vibe. Would you mind making out with me while my husband watches? So they go off to a room in the mansion and they don't have sex, but they totally make out, and the husband's in the corner masturbating, and he comes, and then they're like, "Thanks very much." And they move on with their fucking lives. That's Gene Park.
Gene Park is a rock star.
I like that Gene had the restraint not to tell this one on the Nintendo.
Yeah. Talking about punching up, am I right, boys?
Oh my God, with that fucking soundboard.
I understand.
Oh my God.
I love that guy, and
I can't believe, how does he have all these crazy experiences?
It's really like Hunter Thompson levels of, like, there has not been a Hunter Thompson since Hunter Thompson and Gene. Gene's the second coming.
Gene's insane.
Yeah, he's had a really interesting experience.
You wouldn't see it. You wouldn't know it looking at him.
Yep.
And that's not an insult.
never.
He's just like a mild-mannered, geeky dude. But he lives like a fucking movie star.
Awesome. He's awesome.
He's like, he got some Bruce Wayne shit going.
Yeah.
on.
Goddamn
Totally.
right.
Yeah, I'm glad he's with us.
Mhm.
Cog, have we heard from you on this topic?
No,
No,
we
not
got
yet.
Devin. Yeah, this is interesting because I was like, okay, what haven't I done? And I haven't done. I've done most stuff I want to do, but then I was thinking, like, wait a minute, God, there is something you've been putting off. So the what, as ridiculous as it sounds, I have never been or done a cruise,
Mm.
and I'm like, I need to do that. I just need to do that. I need to experience it. You know, maybe a little extravagant, you know, get your love boat on. You know what I'm saying? You know, I want something a little bougie. I'm at the age, I want something nice.
Yeah, totally.
You know, in life, I want to feel good about myself.
Where would you go? Where would you want to cruise to?
That's the question. I was like, okay, where would I go? So it's probably not, that part is not as significant.
You just want to be on the boat.
I just need to be on a boat.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident that I'm not going to be seasick because I've done like Staten Island Ferry and I've done that before.
God,
And I'm
you
like,
could do that.
nothing bad happened. But then I came to the realization of what I really need to do and why it's probably prohibited me from doing it. And this is embarrassing, but Cog needs to learn how to swim and get over his fear of the water. And it started very young. South Bronx public pools. You go there, and these kids would terrorize you. They catch you slipping by yourself, grab you up, and dunk your ass in the pool.
Trial by fire.
I could not. I was traumatized.
How old were you when this happened? I'm curious.
No more than 5, 7.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll do
So
it.
they got me young. The fear of not being, you know, having control and someone else just dictating, dunking your head under the water, and you're literally dying. Like you little kids can be literally killed during this thing. But people laughing at you. They think it's funny. These kids, the teenagers my age, they were bullying the hell out of us. So I'm like, yeah, they're never gonna happen. I'm not going to no pool. So I guess that's why I became very risk averse. Anything that would put me in danger, I ain't doing that. Nope. Because they could get me, they could drown me, they could. So and this has cost me relationships, Colin. Like to the point where, like, not that I hate going to the beach, but it's like, hey, I know people who are very beach culture. Yo, we're going to the beach, we're gonna spend all day, and I'm like, that's whack. I'm not doing that. like, because I know there's a part of me that I can't swim, so I'm not gonna enjoy it the way you do. And then I'll find myself at the bar or going somewhere else to drink and chill away from the thing. So I'm going for other reasons. So I think I just need to get over that and probably I think I spoke to someone. They was like, yo, you know, someone you could do lessons, but I'm like, I don't know that person. Like, it's a trust thing. I've been traumatized, bro. Like,
that would be awesome if you went to a lesson and then and Colin dunks you. Motherfucker.
Yeah, come. You can come swim in our pool. You know, if you want.
I need to learn how to swim, bro.
Yeah.
It's because of the trauma done to me at such a young age. I need to be able to trust someone that they got me. I'm good. Practice, come up, do the thing, go to the deeper water. You know, I need to get over it. So that's something I need to tackle.
Are you afraid when you do VR water, like the underwater stuff? That doesn't do it. It's literally just the water.
It's the physical water, because I feel like I don't control. And it's being risk averse. It's like, yo, you want to be around, you want to live, you need to be around, bro. Like that could get you out of here if you know what I'm saying? It's stupid, but yeah.
No, I mean, I can barely swim, but I'm not afraid of the beach. I'm afraid of the undertow. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, that's a scary idea.
I love swimming in the ocean. There's something about like the rough and tumble of it. My dad really loves that too, like wave jumping and go.
Can I recommend a movie to you?
Sure.
It's called Naiad. It's with Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. It just came out. It's on Netflix. It's about the woman who swam from Cuba to Key West.
Wow. That's insane.
Wow.
And it is insane what she had to do to do open water swimming to avoid the sharks and the jellyfish and the sunburn. And she didn't stop. She she lost her fucking mind. But it's a great movie, and if you're into ocean swimming, it'll connect with you, I think.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm always looking for recommendations. I think it's funny. Micah doesn't swim either, and I've remarked it's like I totally take it for granted that I know how to swim, and it's just very natural. It's not a thing really for us. Yeah. But I think a lot of it, I don't know if you were on the show, Cog, where Dagan and I were, maybe it was just Dagan and I were by ourselves. We were making fun of just growing up near the beach like we did on Long Island, where we're just a few blocks away from it, and just being like, Jesus Christ. And like by the time you're 8 or 10 years old, you want to be like when your parents like, oh, you want to go to the beach, and you're like, you want to fucking go to the beach? Are you kidding me?
Rather kill myself.
How much are you going to bring us to this place? You know? And now as an adult, I get it a little bit more, where I'm like, because my dad goes like every weekend now, and I'm like, I totally get that. I mean, and he goes to a private beach and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's dope. But when I was a kid, I was like, I fucking hate this. After a while, like, why do we have to always be here? You know?
Yeah.
And so I kind of got a little upset about it. You know, after a while. I don't think I stepped foot on it. I don't think one time I went to a beach in all of high school.
I could totally visualize you pouting to your parents. Now that I've met your parents, I could totally visualize a young Colin pouting about this.
It's like, yeah, we'll get your buckets and all this, and we'll go. And I'm like, dude, I just want to fucking be in front of the TV or something. I don't want to be here.
Can I plug the Nintendo in at the beach? If not, go fuck yourself.
And you get, and it's like Dad's getting you up at like 9 a.m. to go to the beach.
We're trying a good spot.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to be like, I'll get you an egg sandwich and all that. And then it's like, and you're getting home late. It's like, all right, man, this is.
Yeah, trying to sell it specifically to you. I didn't fall in love with the beach until I had a family. But you know what? I should have brought this up when Jaffe was saying, I don't think you're ever going to surf. There is the thing that I am a little afraid of the ocean, which is new to me because I grew up like Colin, like just very intrepid, wave jumping in the waves. Right. I'm a good swimmer. I was a lifeguard for a little while in high school. No problem. Mm-hmm. But about 5 years ago, when my oldest got old enough, she loves the ocean. She loves swimming, but she's really a beach gal. You know, when she got old enough to be brave enough to really go out, especially after the lifeguard shift was over at 5 o'clock, she's like, Dad, let's go out and jump in the waves. Way out. And that's when it started for some reason to dawn on me, like, I'm afraid of this. There's something, the current, the deep sea creatures, what I can't see, like all of a sudden everything started to hit that I never even thought of before. So that doesn't play well into my surfing fantasies. Yeah. You know, that I don't want to go in water above my head necessarily. Murky water. I don't care if it's 20 feet of water I could see. You know, when we're swimming in the Caribbean and snorkeling and you're in 30 feet of water and you can see the bottom, that's different. But murky water, you know, Northeast United States water.
Hudson.
No. I've done scuba diving and I love it, but it's too risky. I would do it a lot if I wasn't terrified of dying because there's too many ways to die there. But it's beautifully relaxing. But do you think, Cog, you actually will, like in 2 years jump cut, do you think you'll be able to swim, or is this just like it'd be nice to, but I'm not really going to put the time in?
I have to meet the right person.
Romantically, like she motivates you to swim.
You know why?
Like a mermaid. Because that's not real.
Yo, you stupid. I do feel that people's interests when you love someone can help gravitate towards their interests. So it's like, all right, I'll give it a shot because of you. You know what I mean? So maybe, you know, I think that's my shot, but. Or like if I knew, you know, someone who's a legit instructor that I trusted and I'm like, yo, I know you do that. You know what? Let me take a course with you and let me get this done.
If Phil Spencer was drowning, would you learn to swim? You'd learn to swim.
No, Phil gonna die. He's gonna die. You were telling that story about that lady who swam across and did that thing.
Oh yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, if they throw me overboard anywhere, I'm finished.
Oh yeah. No, I mean,
and that's a horrible way to die.
It's like, Rose, get off the door. I can't fucking stay out here. You know.
You don't think you'll just swim? Like, you know, when you throw a cat in the water and it just swims?
Because the fear, the panic, the minute the water goes over the throat, the nose is over. It's like,
you can dog paddle and stay afloat, but you'll be exhausted.
You know? So I'll kill myself based on fear and panic and overexertion.
Yeah.
And drowning sounds
you gotta get your pants off and shit. You got if you fall in the ocean, you gotta get your clothes off ASAP.
That's a lifeguard thing.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, totally. Especially your pants. And
really?
Yeah, because you're going to get dragged down and become mega heavy. And it's going to tire you out like really quickly. So you need to use your energy early to get a lot of your clothes and your weight off if you're going to be in that situation.
It sounds like you're saying something that some weird guy at the beach told you when you were
no. Dude, you can even watch it in the water. Dude, I know this. actually a
Go
weird.
ahead, Colin. Let me see. Go do it.
No, like you can watch these survival videos where these guys will take off their pants and like literally make a
Those
like a
aren't
life
survival
vest
videos,
out of
Colin.
the. they'll take their pants and they'll like do this thing with them where they like almost like a jump rope in the water.
They make
and
a
then
pontoon.
right? And then
Yeah.
you can like make
Right.
a air thing for yourself and all these crazy things.
Fashion a little
And
flotation.
then you can
device.
refill it and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I always have said that I feel like watching people learn how to swim and like people freaking out is like that's part of the problem. You just got to be easy, you know? Like you just float. You really kind of you have to just put a little bit of energy into staying up. Like you can even lay in certain ways where you don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
You'll float.
And you'll
Yeah,
float.
you just lay back and you'll float.
You know,
Which is
and
one with the
it's like you
water.
just got to be easy. I'm
Yeah,
telling you,
Bruce
Cog,
Lee.
if you're ever down in Virginia, I'm sure you'll come visit us one day.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome to. Our pool's only 6 feet deep,
There we
so
go.
it's
There we
like
go.
good to just walk around in and kind of acclimate yourself. And no
And
one
get
else.
a lot
We'll
of
have
reading done.
the security cameras are going to get you. We might release those, but all things depending. But yeah, that's it. That's good. I hope that you do learn that. Hopefully,
Yeah.
the right woman, not a mermaid, comes along, because that's going to be complicated. Even if you met a
mermaid would
mermaid,
be
there's
cool.
the whole complication.
Yeah, there's a whole.
Because we look at it through the Little Mermaid lens, where it's like they figure that out, but that's not going to be
Splash.
figured out. You're going to be fucked.
Why?
Because
Why would
one
you
of them
be
is going to
fucked?
have to. You can't live in the same world. Like they figured it out where they got to live in the same human world.
You
But
could
if
just
Cog
build
met a
pool
mermaid
in your
now, he would have
house.
to stay on the surface and she would have to live in the below.
No, you could have an inside pool with salt water. I've planned all this out
Oh,
on,
no.
just in case.
Okay.
No,
I've just thought about this.
But yeah, that's true.
where does
That's
your
true.
penis go?
See, Colin want to do the classification already.
That's a good point.
That's a good
I don't
point.
know.
Does a mermaid lay eggs? That's weird. I don't know.
She doesn't seem to have anything going on at all.
Nothing.
Nothing.
No.
Well, on that note,
How
But
do
they have boobs.
they do.
Yeah.
They have boobs. Yeah, breasts.
They do have boobage.
Breasts. Someone
God,
wrote in on
you know
sick.
what's
Oh, I'm
funny?
sorry, Dave. Go
What's
ahead. No, go.
No, I was going to say about swimming. I remember I was a really late bloomer with swimming. I remember my parents getting really frustrated with me. It was like 3 seasons of swimming lessons that wasn't taking. I didn't learn to swim until I was like 8.
Oh, okay.
Dude, it's
Which is
hysterical that
really
you took
late.
swimming lessons. Like,
Oh, 3 times.
no one taught me how to. Dad just threw me in the pool basically by the time it got to me.
Savage.
There were 2 other Moriartys that didn't make it.
Yeah,
They,
there's 6 of
they
us.
couldn't figure it out.
There's 6 of us. Yeah.
But you know what it was? It was seeing the kids dive. I was like, oh, diving
Oh.
looks too fun. I have to learn how to swim just so I could do that.
Mm.
And I finally learned because I thought I had to dive. Like diving was just, I can't miss out on this anymore.
Dave, did you ever have the public? We didn't have a public. We grew up. We were lucky enough to grow up with our own pool, but at the public pool, like the classic climbing up the ladder and then having to climb down the ladder. That always happens to someone. You know what I'm
We
talking
had
about? Like,
bullies push kids off the high dive into the
Yeah.
pool.
Oh my God.
Bro.
That's some trauma.
yeah,
I mean,
definitely, dude.
That's
I
trauma.
never went up there because I didn't want to get pushed off.
Yo, they used to grab kids up and dunk them from up there. It was crazy.
You know,
Like,
I shit in the public pool once.
Oh, like Caddyshack.
That's
Well, no, that was a Mr.
That was
Goodbar,
fake,
or
yeah,
that was
wasn't
that was
yeah, it wasn't
Baby
a
Ruth.
Snickers.
No, I was 10 years old and I couldn't make it out in time, and I'm like, well, I guess I just shit in the pool. And then I didn't think anybody would notice, and I went to bed. And the next day, I woke up and they had hazmat suit guys down there, like, you
They
know,
gotta shut
Wow,
it down.
that really
Yeah, they-
happened to you. That's
they
so
gotta shut
that
funny.
really
Yeah.
happened, and it didn't traumatize me. That says something about me. I'm broken. But the last thing I'll say, real quick, on the Cog thing is, the drowning part is both terrifying, but they do say when you finally die, and right, it's actually the most peaceful way to go. But you've got to get through that
Ugh.
horror
Oh.
of just like knowing if I take a breath, it's just going to be water. But you're going to do it because that's your instinct, and it all just comes in, and
Oh.
you're, oh my God, man, I
Awful.
can't fathom. Cannot fathom.
Yeah, it is dark.
Thanks for helping me
That's
watch
like the
trauma.
most scary way I would think. Yeah, conceptually, that's
terrifying.
not going to do it for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I said, there was that made for TV movie I watched in the early 90s that always haunted me, where this woman was swimming in the backyard in a pool and she came up and there was a glass, like there was like a cover over it. She couldn't get out.
yo.
It was in-
No,
Hey,
that's-
see, that's
You're not
me in my
helping.
head.
Yeah, no, I didn't
Without
mean to do.
helping,
Yeah,
Tom.
dude, I saw that when I was similar. I watched, my mom and I were watching one of her soap operas in the late 80s, and there was a whole arc about this guy getting buried alive, and that
Yeah,
stayed with
another
me
one of mine.
forever.
Ever, bro, those things terrifying.
Forever. Ever since then, I was like, oh, that's literally a thing I say to people. I'm like, you understand that you have to cremate me. Like everyone in my life knows, like you must cremate me. If I'm still alive, put me in the fucking furnace and it's going to be over in a second. You can't put me in this situation.
Last point, you'll laugh, Colin. It's funny you mentioned the Barry Alive thing. As a kid, I remember I told you about Ultimate Warrior story as the hero. One of the things that absolutely traumatized me is he fought the Undertaker, and then they had a skit where they put him in a coffin and they locked him in.
Oh man!
And I said, "Oh no, they got my man. He's out of here." Yeah. And they literally they constructed this. I guess they had a false bottom, but you tell that to a little kid who believes Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior are your heroes, and
who
you see
just gotten dunked in the pool. He was already sensitive and worried. Oh man. Hey, listen, GDC about 8 years ago had a video game, one of their experimental video games, where you would get in a coffin and they would lock the coffin and you had a cell phone peripheral that had only like in the narrative, I don't know how much it actually was, like 25% power. And then you had another player who was playing a 911 operator and you had to somehow figure out how to tell the operator where you were before your air runs out. And I was like, that is so clever and so cool.
That's dark. I love that.
I can't breathe just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Well, let's end. Are we all satisfied on the topic?
Very nice.
It's time to go then.
Done, gents.
It's time to go. It's good to see all of you guys. Let's go around the horn and say goodbye to everyone. Cog, good to see you, my friend. Have a good, well, at the time we're recording this, a good weekend.
Yeah. Great show. Always Stelly is one of my favorites. Just the free flowing nature where we go.
What if Cog drowns between now and when this goes live?
That would be dark.
I'm just saying. What do you mean? Because it would be like, what do you do with the footage? That would be a prophetic thing. I mean, this would be a legendary podcast. You would have to air it. Cog, would you want him to air it or never air it?
If that were to happen, he could air it.
Yeah, okay.
But then we would stop and zoom in slow motion on your face, and it would play like what song?
In the Arms of an Angel.
Play the Streets of Rage opening.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That'll be nice. If I come back on the show, if you guys ever invite me, I'll. That's my topic. What songs do you want played at your funeral?
Yeah, sure. I actually thought about that. It's funny you mentioned that, Jaffe. I actually thought about. I want people crying. I want bawling.
Oh wow.
I'm playing some emotional beats. Y'all gonna think about me, damn it.
Okay, good.
They're gonna play. They're gonna play Mike and the Mechanics in the living years at my funeral.
Oh
to remind everyone of all the time they wasted with me. All right.
Mine will be like All I Need Is a Miracle. It's like,
anyway. Yeah, another great. I love that song. I play that song on the drums.
Yeah, it's great.
Jaffe, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Good to see you guys. Thank you guys for having me as always. Thank you guys for listening. I will find you in the comments. I always comment on this show.
Oh, good.
People are like Jaffe. The best part about Jaffe being on the show is he always comes in here and like gets pissed at people. So I'll be there, motherfuckers. But thanks for having me, guys.
Cool, man. It was good to have you. And Dag, finally, good to see you, my friend. Have a good rest of your day, your weekend.
Oh, so nice, man. Thank you, everybody. This was super fun. Kyle, I thought of something for you. What about JIRPG? Japanese inspired RPG. Takes care of the whole thing because it's obviously reverent.
Yeah, that works too. Yeah.
Can't be an insult.
And people can come up with an obnoxious way to say it, like jerpage or jerpage.
Yeah, you can almost pronounce it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or how about Japanese, European, Western RPG?
Yeah, something
Japanese,
like Jew RPG.
Jew RPG. Yeah, Jew RPG. Perfect.
I love it.
All right, my friend.
Shut your mic off.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia for early ad-free access, etc. LastStandMedia.store for merch. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.